Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, the case of Rachel Nicholl. On a sunny July morning, a young woman took her son for a walk in the city park. They planned to go out early, since the day was expected to be hot, while enjoying the summer morning. They strolled along a quiet path by the stream, when a stranger suddenly appeared in front of them. Rachel Nicholl was born on November 23, 1968. In London, she was beautiful and artistic. With an early interest in fashion, at the age of 10, she announced that she wanted to become a model. With determination and her striking looks, she achieved her dream. By the age of 20, she was participating in London Fashion Week. But Rachel's success on the catwalk was short-lived. In 1989, she met a Spaniard named Andre Hanscom. This fateful encounter quickly developed into a passionate love affair. Shortly after, Rachel discovered she was pregnant, which made Rachel happy. But at the same time, she knew that she would have to put her modeling career on hold to focus on motherhood. At that time, Rachel began to change her life. In 1990, Alexandra was born to young parents who were not married and were in no hurry to enter into a legal relationship. They lived together harmoniously, with Andre earning a good income that allowed Rachel to focus entirely on raising their child. The family settled in a comfortable apartment in southwest London, near Wimbledon Common, where they adopted a dog named Molly and enjoyed a peaceful family life. On the sunny and calm morning of July 15, 1992, the weather forecast predicted a hot day. Because of this, Rachel opted for an earlier walk than usual, around 9 a.m. Rachel took her 2-year-old son Alexander and their dog Molly out to enjoy the fresh air. Wimbledon Common, a vast green space, nearly 4 square kilometers in size, tends to get quite busy during the summer holidays, which is why Rachel preferred to go in the morning, it being a beautifully sunny day. Filled with flowers and lush greenery, Molly and Alexander was playing in the grass. Unfortunately, what started as a lovely summer outing with his mother and pet quickly turned into a traumatic experience. Alexander recalled that suddenly, a man jumped out of the bushes. With a sling thrown over his shoulder and a large black bag, the man pulled out a knife and approached them, pushing Alexander to the ground. Moments later, Rachel fell down beside the boy. The park gradually became crowded, but mother and son were not seen until about 10:30 a.m. A passerby noticed Alexander crying as he clung to Rachel, who was lying on the ground. "Mom, wake up! Why won't you wake up?" At this time, Rachel's clothes were dirty. Adding to the tragic scene, a paper receipt rested on her forehead, which Alexander had placed there the day before. His mother had told him about bandages, and he thought that with this plaster, his mother get better. The details of what happened shocked even seasoned detectives. By the stream, Rachel had been stabbed 49 times in the neck and body. Besides, she had also been abused. The attacker only harmed Rachel. Her son, Alexander, and their dog Molly were unharmed. It was hard to comprehend that such a horrific crime could occur in broad daylight in a busy area. Initially, the police suspected that the perpetrator knew Rachel and had planned the attack, but it soon became clear that this was not the case. Rachel typically visited the park at a different time. After examining the area, law enforcement officers could not identify any suspects. She lived a quiet life focused on motherhood. Previously, she had been a model, and although she hadn't walked the runway in about 3 years, her beauty still attracted attention from men. It's possible that Rachel had a secret admirer who felt spurned and sought revenge. Upon investigating the crime scene, the police discovered that the only evidence left by the perpetrator was his male reproductive cell. Experts managed to create a genetic profile of the suspect, but in the early 90s, the DNA database was nearly empty, and no matches were found. During their investigation, the police canvassed the park for witnesses, interviewing around 500 people who had been there on July 15 between 9 and 11 a.m., but only one person provided significant information. A witness reported seeing a man around 9:30 a.m. who was washing his hands in a stream and then wiping his jacket. This man was carrying a black bag over his shoulder and which stood out to Alexander based on this description. The police created a composite sketch of a young man with short brown hair, approximately 180 meters tall. Although the man's behavior was suspicious, there was no solid evidence linking him to the crime. The only actual witness to the tragedy was Alexander, who was only 2 years old at the time and unable to provide any helpful information to the police following the highly publicized murder in the park. Journalists became increasingly interested in Alexander. Even trying to interview him at the playground, Andre had a strong alibi. He was at work during the incident. After the tragedy, Andre chose to leave the country, taking his son to live in Spain. After several months of investigation, detectives began to narrow their focus. 32 men were questioned in connection with the murder. The investigation quickly focused on Colin Stagg, a man from Roehampton who was known to walk his dog on the common. However, Colin Stagg came back into focus for the police when they discovered he had previously been fined £200 for being found naked in a park, although there was no physical evidence connecting Colin to the Rachel case. The police concentrated their efforts on him. They even sought the expertise of renowned criminal psychologist Paul Britton to create a psychological profile of the potential killer. Britton's report suggested that the attacker likely chose the victim at random while hiding in the bushes near the path, implying that he might not have known her beforehand. The profile indicated that the attacker was probably between 20 and 35 years old, shy, and had difficulty interacting with people, especially women. It was suggested that he likely did not have a wife or girlfriend who could satisfy his unusual fantasies, leading to feelings of distress that may have driven him to commit crimes. When the police compared this psychological profile with Colin, they found several matching traits, such as a similar age and the fact that he was a loner who lived close to the park and walked his dog there twice a day. However, this information was merely circumstantial, and the police needed more concrete evidence to proceed with an arrest. To gather evidence, detectives brought Colin in for questioning. During their discussion, Colin admitted he had met Rachel in the park, noting he remembered her because he found her attractive. He also mentioned that he had never been in a serious relationship, which troubled him. However, the police did not have enough evidence to charge him, so they devised a plan to trap him. They created an operation called Edsel, with an undercover officer named Lizzie James at the center of it. Her goal was to build a relationship with Colin, making him lower his guard, and hopefully he confessed to the crime involving Rachel. To achieve this, Lizzie frequently consulted a criminal psychologist for advice on how to connect with Colin. She developed a relationship with him, going on dates, talking on the phone, and writing letters together. Lizzie told Colin that she liked the occult and unusual experiments. At one point, she directly asked Colin if he wanted to explore some of his fantasies. He responded affirmatively and shared disturbing from violent thoughts. Despite her repeated attempts to get him to talk about the crime in the park, he remained silent in a private conversation. She suggested she would be willing to sleep with him if he confessed to what he did to Rachel. Colin replied, "I'm really sorry, but I didn't do it. I didn't harm Rachel in any way." Despite his firm denial and the absence of solid evidence, Colin was arrested in 1993. The police had recordings of phone conversations in which Colin admitted to Lizzie that he enjoyed hurting others. Additionally, during discussions with Lizzie about the incident in the park, he described specific details about the creek where Rachel was murdered, which details that only the actual perpetrator would know. The trial commenced in September 1994. In response to the unfounded allegations, Colin went on a hunger strike, leading to significant weight loss and a visibly exhausted appearance during the proceedings. In court, Colin stated, "Most of what I shared with Lizzie is not true. I invented much of it because I liked her and didn't want to let down the only woman I thought cared about me. I'm not interested in violence, and I have never done anything remotely like that. I'm certainly not capable of what happened to Rachel. After listening to both the prosecution and the defense, the judge determined that the police had been overly reckless in trying to obtain a confession through inappropriate investigative methods. The judge concluded that Colin was not involved in the Rachel tragedy and ordered his immediate release in the courtroom every year. On the anniversary of the murders, Scotland Yard faces pressure to advance the investigation. In the late 1990s, the Rachel murder was reinvestigated as part of Operation Enigma, which was a nationwide multi-agency investigation into the unsolved murders of 207 women under new management. Detectives began to collect evidence and files related to the case starting in 2000. In 2006, officers located Robert Napa, who was 40 years old at the time and had serious diagnoses of paranoid schizophrenia and autism spectrum disorder. In November 1993, he was convicted of murdering a young woman named Samantha Bissett and her 4-year-old daughter, Jasmine. He had been held in a secure facility for over 10 years. Robert carefully observed Samantha's movements and poses. One night, he waited for the right moment and entered her home through the balcony door, which was usually left open. Ultimately, Robert positioned Samantha on the bed in a way that reflected how she often appeared during intimate moments with her partner when the officers examined the crime scenes. They frequently required breaks and assistance from a psychologist, as they had never faced such brutality before. This tragedy occurred 16 months after the attack on model Rachel. Robert was born in 1966 in London. His father was a driving instructor, and his mother worked as a nursing home assistant. The parents often fought, and these arguments took place in front of the children. Robert had 2 younger brothers and a sister. When Robert was 9, his father left the family for Australia, where he became a fireman. Robert struggled with his parents' divorce. He wrote letters to his father, but over time, their connection faded. The father remembered Robert as a sweet child and believed he would not engage in terrible actions in the future. At school, Robert rarely made friends. He was often isolated, secretive, and aspired to be an astronomer. Classmates described him as living in his own world. His mother noted that Robert frequently hid behind doors to eavesdrop on her conversations with relatives. Afterward, he would confront them, accusing them of making up stories about him. He often lied and fought with his brothers. Additionally, Robert liked to spy on his sister when she was in the shower or when she was just changing clothes in the room. Sometimes, he would throw her back in bed. His mother noticed that her son was behaving strangely and that he had problems with his mental health issues. When Robert turned 11, his mother sent him for a psychiatric examination. After his first therapy session, Robert came home smiling, and the psychiatrist said he thought Robert mentally unwell. He was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome and began receiving the appropriate treatment. A year later, at age 12, Robert was attacked while walking with 2 younger boys. A stranger approached and forced them into a disturbing situation, which was traumatic for the group. This incident occurred in a park close to Robert's home. Psychologists believe this was the turning point that led to Robert's troubling behavior. His teacher noted that, after the incident, Robert underwent a dramatic change. It was as if he had shut down emotionally. Becoming like a soulless robot, he stopped expressing emotions and responding. He simply sat at his desk, completed his work, and went home. During a literature lesson, the students listened to a recording of a Victorian-era short story about a murder. As they listened, Robert turned pale, began to shake, and sweat formed on his forehead. The teacher initially thought he was having a seizure, but soon everything passed. Sometime later, Robert stole money from his uncle. His mother went to the police and requested that her son be taken to the station, fingerprinted, and treated like a criminal. She hoped this would scare him into changing his ways, but it didn't work. People around him saw him as a nice, normal guy, but at home, he was completely different. Robert had average intelligence and disliked physical work. At 16, he dropped out of school, took courses in catering, and started working as a laborer. He frequently changed jobs and often went months without work, spending time alone in his room. When his mother remarried, Robert immediately disliked his stepfather and refused to speak to him. By the time he turned 18, his behavior had become so troubling that his mother told him he had to leave her house. After that, she did not see him for 5 years. They finally reunited when Robert was living in a rundown room in South London. He told his mother that, 2 months earlier, he had forced a girl into an intimate situation in the park. She was unsure if he was being serious or joking. She contacted a psychiatrist and reported the incident to the police. However, the officers investigated and found no record of anyone reporting an attack in the city park. Surprisingly, they did not even question Robert. They never met or spoke with him. Robert began showing signs of paranoid schizophrenia around the age of 20, which took over his mind. He believed he was a brilliant mathematician who had won a Nobel Prize, had immense power, a multi-million-dollar fortune, and could communicate through telepathy. Robert was convinced that he had not been touched. Robert's first known victim was a 31-year-old woman, a young mother sunbathing in her garden in 1989. After attacking her, he warned, "If you want advice, don't leave the back door open." Over the next 2 years, Robert established a clear pattern of crimes. He typically targeted secluded areas in the park. His victims were usually young, attractive women, often with blonde hair. Notably, Robert committed several attacks in the same locations where he himself had been assaulted at age 12 between 1989 and 1993. He is believed to have attacked at least 11 women. Robert was short, but in great physical shape. He often carried a knife and rope, though he didn't always use them, and kept a weapon at home. As he committed more attacks, he became increasingly cruel to his victims. After he murdered Samantha and Jasmine, he left a fingerprint at their home, which helped detectives identify the killer as Robert Napper, a storekeeper at the time. Robert was arrested a year later. In May 1994, he was convicted but not sent to prison. Instead, he was sent to a maximum security psychiatric hospital, Broadmoor. Detectives investigating Rachel's case had considered Robert a suspect for some time. On 18 December 2008, at the Old Bailey, Robert pleaded guilty to the manslaughter of Rachel Nicholl on the grounds of diminished responsibility. Judge Griffith Williams said Robert would be detained indefinitely at Broadmoor because he was a very dangerous man. There was no prospect of his release. At one point, Andre considered returning to England, but ultimately chose to stay in Spain. Years later, Andre got married, so Alexander got a stepmother and 2 sisters, with the support of his father and family. Alexander successfully found his path in life. Alexander vividly remembers the unfortunate day in a London park. In order to cope with them, he became interested in meditation and eventually became a yoga trainer. He also wrote a book about his mother and his life. According to him, it helped him finally accept his memories and forgive Robert Napper. Colin Stagg, who was wrongfully accused of murdering Rachel, demanded compensation for moral damages and won the case, receiving as compensation £700 sterling. Hello everyone. Today we will learn about another case, the case of Alexandra Dukay. Alexandra Dukay, a talented and ambitious young woman, was once the pride of her family and friends, with a promising career in the entertainment industry. With her radiant appearance, intelligence, and burning passion, Alexandra appeared in many television shows and relentlessly pursued her big dream. But everything suddenly stopped one day in May 2006, when she was found brutally murdered in the basement of her family's home in Milford, Connecticut. Alexandra's tragic death not only shocked the community, but also opened a years-long investigation, revealing haunting hidden corners of the person who took her life. Alexandra was born on December 9, 1979, in New Haven, Connecticut, USA. Her relatives called her Sandra. She grew up on the coast, just an hour outside of New York. In the Milford area, Alexandra's parents were named John and Linda. The girl's parents met in 1974 in Connecticut, and a few months later, they got married. Alexandra had two older brothers. Despite the age difference, they were very close. The brothers looked after their younger sister and helped their parents. They all played sports together and spent most of their time playing games. They lived in a big house, and Alexandra used the basement as her room. Later, she equipped it not only as a bedroom, but also as a gym, where she invited friends over for overnight stays and socializing. Alexandra was engaged in dancing and gymnastics in high school. She had a dream of becoming an actress, which quite corresponded with her ambitious and active character. She had been dancing throughout her childhood, and in her youth, she began to take part in various competitions, earning awards along the way. She had a very busy schedule. In addition to dancing, Alexandra continued her studies to get a degree in law. After receiving her secondary education, she entered college. Alexandra completed dance courses and then got a part-time job at a bank. While working there, she met her first love, a guy named Matthew Pugh. Both loved sports and worked hard. Alexandra was able to obtain a bachelor's degree in finance and became a systems analyst at the same bank where she had worked for several years prior. She dedicated almost 10 years to this business, and in parallel, she received a license as a real estate agent. At the age of 23, Alexandra also became an assistant teacher at the dance academy. Career successes accompanied her, and later, Alexandra performed a lot in New York, dancing at events and even starring in music videos. At 26, she began working with a producer from Atlanta to create demo versions of videos for music albums. Her dreams began to materialize. An agent in New York who helped her pass auditions, and as a result, she landed supporting roles in a popular TV series for Alexandra. It was a significant milestone, despite the secondary role. She believed it was only a stepping stone to greater success, given the scale of her activities. She had practically no time for a personal life, despite having dated her boyfriend for years. By January 2004, they decided to break up. Alexandra chose to fully concentrate on work and dancing. This decision coincided with a difficult time for her family. Her parents also decided to separate. Her father returned to Florida to be closer to his elderly mother. By this time, Alexandra's brothers had moved away and were living with their own families, leaving her effectively alone with her mother. Despite most of the house being vacated, she continued to live in the basement, which she had equipped for her own purposes. It contained training equipment, as well as a whole stand filled with dance awards. Alexandra lived in the basement with her big dog, and her busy life did not prevent her from attending acting auditions. She had new prospects in cinema during this period, and also became interested in charity work. She collected items and toys for children from low-income families, and later planned to organize a free canteen for those in need with like-minded individuals. However, the situation changed dramatically. On May 19, 2006, Alexandra met her best friend, Nicole, with whom she worked out at the gym. They trained together from 10.15 to 11.15, after which her friend left. Nicole wanted to stay longer at the gym, while Alexandra planned to go home for lunch and to get ready for her evening plans. Around 4 p.m., Nicole called Alexandra, but the call went straight to voicemail. This was unusual, as Alexandra was usually very responsive due to her work requiring frequent phone communication. By 4:03 p.m., Alexandra still had not replied. Meanwhile, Linda, Alexandra's mother, arrived home and noticed the front door was wide open. Alexandra's favorite dog was outside in the courtyard, and her daughter's white Mitsubishi was parked in the driveway. This was odd because the doors were usually closed, and the dog never went outside without a collar and leash. The dog sat outside, wagging its tail, which added to Linda's concern. She was in a panic, trying to understand what had happened. So she entered the house screaming. As Linda moved through the house, her anxiety grew. She went to the basement stairs and noticed large drops of dark red liquids on the floor. When she reached the bottom, she saw another large dark red liquid stain. To her horror, she found Alexandra lying on her back, unresponsive. With a massive pool of red liquid beneath her, Alexandra had a severe head injury and was lying in an unnatural position under a table. The mother initially thought her daughter might have fallen down the stairs and hit her head on the radiator, which had a visible blood stain. Linda rushed to her daughter to check for a pulse, but found none. She could barely regain her composure and managed to call 911 in a state of panic. She screamed into the phone. Trying to describe the horrific scene before her, the dispatcher struggled to understand her, as her words were often interrupted by sobs and incoherent mumbling. Eventually, the dispatcher understood that Linda's daughter was lying on the basement floor and showed no signs of life. When several police officers arrived, Linda met them outside. The sight they encountered in the basement was one of the most disturbing they had ever seen. In here, there are traces of a terrible attack, and Alexandra's face was seriously injured. A piece of the knife was found embedded in her skull. The broken handle lay nearby. It was clear that Alexandra had been attacked with a kitchen knife, with such force that the handle had snapped off. Alexandra received blunt force trauma to the face, and her mother discovered that one of Alexandra's trophies was missing. Investigators believe the perpetrator used the trophy to seriously injure Alexandra's face. The police quickly concluded that Alexandra was a murder victim, along with the brutal injuries and the apparent murder weapon. Investigators found a shoe print in the blood. This shoe print lacked a typical tread pattern. Additionally, small traces of blood were found in other areas of the house, including the bathroom on the toilet seat and sink, presumably where the attacker was trying to wash his hands. Moreover, investigators noticed signs of an attempt to clean the red streaks in certain spots around the home. This led law enforcement to suspect that there was a personal motive behind the crime, possibly related to the missing trophy. Given the violent nature of the attack, they believed the culprit was likely someone known to Alexandra. While most furniture and belongings in the apartment were untouched, nearly all the clothes had been removed from the closet, and valuables like jewelry and money were left behind. It appeared the assailant was searching for something specific, which resulted in items being strewn across the bed and floor. The police reported that Alexandra was attacked when she went to the basement. She was pushed down the stairs. Suffering her first injury when she hit her head on the radiator, she did not die immediately. As there were clear signs of a struggle, detectives quickly determined that the knife used in the attack had been brought from outside. Since none of the kitchen utensils from the house were missing, investigators accessed a mobile phone belonging to the victim and discovered over 100 phone numbers she was familiar with, all of which needed to be thoroughly examined. During the investigation of the crime scene, another notable detail emerged. A garbage bag had been removed from the trash can. This suggested that the attacker had disposed of it to avoid leaving crucial evidence for the investigators. They believed that he might have changed his clothes, using the large garbage bag to dispose of blood-stained items. Around 5 p.m., Alexandra's brother and her friend Nicole arrived at the scene. Nicole was in a state of hysteria because, having seen Alexandra alive a few hours earlier, the quiet Milford area where Alexandra lives is filled with people close to her, including Linda and Nicole. The local community was anxious to know what had happened, but the police refused to provide any comments until they clarified the circumstances of the crime. The house was cordoned off. A friend mentioned that after her workout, Alexandra had planned to get ready for a date with a new guy, whom she intended to meet at a restaurant. Nicole identified the guy as Jason Malone, but she did not know any other details, which making him a person of interest for the police. Detectives and family members of Alexandra were canvassing the area and interviewing residents. In Milford, a place known for its low crime rate, this incident shocked the community. Alexandra was a celebrity known for her minor roles in the TV series Law and Order Now. She herself has become the face of crime reporting. The seriousness of the situation brought national media attention. The police reached out to the media to seek potential witnesses, prompting local journalists to actively search for information. However, neighbors provided conflicting accounts. One man reported seeing a red pickup truck near the scene around 12:03 p.m. that he believed did not belong to anyone in the area. Another neighbor claimed to have seen a black man walking past the victim's house around 4 p.m., who then got into a dark green Honda Accord. Unfortunately, none of the witnesses took photos or remembered the license plate numbers. Meanwhile, detectives were trying to learn more about Jason, who out to be Alexandra's new boyfriend, although they couldn't reach him directly. His sister answered the police's calls and provided information about him, allowing them to invite him to the police station for questioning. When Jason arrived, he appeared nervous, but firmly stated that he had no involvement in the murder. He confirmed that he was Alexandra's new boyfriend, explaining that they met when he visited the bank with a friend. He was shy and told his friend that he found her very attractive. Jason asked his friend to get Alexandra's phone number for him, which she agreed. That evening, she called Jason. They arranged to meet and chat, eventually planning their first date. Jason was a few years older than Alexandra at the time of their meeting. He lived with his mother, having moved out from his ex-girlfriend, with whom he had broken up. Jason was experiencing a tough time, as his relationship with his ex sometimes rekindled and then fell apart again. He worked for an energy company, where he checked electric meters in homes throughout the city. Meanwhile, Alexandra was in no hurry to announce them as a couple. After a 6-year relationship with her ex, she wanted to take a closer look at her new boyfriend and make no statements about him. At the station, Jason reported that he called Alexandra around noon. They had a calm conversation and made plans for the evening, intending to have dinner together. During their phone call, Alexandra suddenly asked him to hold on because she saw her ex-boyfriend outside her house. Jason then heard the door open, and Alexandra asked, "What are you doing here?" but received no response. After the door closed, she picked up her phone again and told Jason she couldn't talk at that moment. Jason suspected that she let someone into her house and then didn't call him back, which made him feel suspicious and a bit jealous. 15 minutes later, when she still hadn't called back, he started to worry. Fortunately, she answered his call at 12:35. They spoke for a few more minutes, but Alexandra didn't mention who had visited her or why. Jason's account helped narrow down the time frame of when Alexandra died, according to Jason. During this period, he was busy with work, driving around the city and checking equipment. After 3 p.m., he went to a clothing store to choose new pants for their date. Around 4:3, he tried calling her again, but she didn't answer. Later, when he went to her house, he noticed police cars nearby. The police talked to the victim's relatives and found out that Alexandra's only ex-boyfriend was Matthew. However, they had broken up 2 years, while detectives were working on obtaining a warrant to examine mobile phones. They spoke with Alexandra's relatives. They learned that her breakup with her ex-boyfriend was not smooth. Linda was aware that Matthew had a criminal record and had treated Alexandra poorly. Their relationship lasted until Matthew was first imprisoned in 1998. During his time in prison, Alexandra supported and visited him, but he ended up serving a long sentence, despite Alexandra's love for him. Doubts about their relationship grew. By January 2004, they officially ended their relationship, partly due to Matthew's increasingly rude and threatening behavior. Although they still communicated, his aggression continued to rise. So was no chance of rekindling their relationship. At this time, Matthew was found living with his wife about 30 minutes from the home of Alexandra. On the day the police arrived, he was working at a Papa John's restaurant. The conversation with the police took place right there on the 15th. He mentioned that he had 2 jobs, the second being with a company that manufactures aircraft parts. Located about an hour north of Milford, he claimed he was working from 6:3 a.m. to 3 p.m. on the day of the murder and left home only after learning that Alexandra had died. The police noticed he appeared somewhat confused during the conversation. Matthew appeared to distrust the police, but he did admit that he had spoken to Alexandra on the phone a few days before her death. Their last in-person meeting, however, had occurred at least 4 weeks prior to the tragic event. After this conversation, the detectives left the following day. Matthew returned to the police station and confessed that he had lied during their previous discussion. He clarified that he actually arrived at work at 6:3 a.m., but at 9:15 a.m. he requested time off and left. He spent most of the day at home and went into town to care for a sick relative. Matthew insisted that he was neither in Milford nor close to the suburbs that day. He agreed to take a DNA test and provided the police with the clothes he wore on the day of his ex-girlfriend's death. The investigation continued, and both he and Jason remained the main suspects in the murder. Forensic experts determined that Alexandra had died from multiple stab wounds, cuts, and blunt force trauma. Primarily to her face, the attack was so brutal that she had swallowed several of her own knocked-out teeth before dying. The expert discovered a crucial piece of evidence. A hair found stuck to the dried blood on Alexandra's body did not belong to her. Additionally, pieces of duct tape were found on her face. Apparently, it was used to tape her mouth during the massacre. Investigators looked into Jason's background and found that he had a criminal record. Having served over 5 years for banned substance trafficking, he also drove a car that matched the description given by a neighbor of one of the victims. Another witness reported seeing this dark green car parked near Alexandra's house throughout the day. Despite this, Jason maintained his innocence, arguing that the car model he drove was very common in the city at that time. However, detectives could verify not his alibi of being at a clothing store to buy pants around 3 p.m. He had indeed visited the store, but much later in the evening, which contradicted his statement. Maybe he was trying to mislead the investigation, however, by checking the geolocation data from his phone calls. Investigators found that although his phone was active throughout the day, it never registered in the Milford area. Consequently, the police ruled him out as a suspect. It was now Matthew's turn to be questioned. The police spoke with Alexandra's mother to gather more information about him. She had never liked Matthew. He was 7 years older than Alexandra and had a criminal record. Unlike Alexandra, he showed no interest in personal growth or work. The detectives then contacted his employer, who confirmed that he had left work much earlier than he had claimed. Instead of finishing at 9:15 a.m., he actually left at 8:39 a.m. He had also been at a gas station at 2:1 p.m., not at noon, as he had told the police. The discrepancies in his words were alarming. While he spent time at car dealerships until 4 p.m., the times he provided were incorrect. The investigators suspected that Matthew might be the murderer. On May 26, they obtained a search warrant for his house. Inside, everything was tidy and clean, with nothing suspicious found except for some fine art. It was assumed that the remains of this roll could have been found on the victim's face. However, this did not indicate involvement in the murder. Since many people have electrical tape in their homes, all other tests and analyses failed to link Matthew to the crime. A thorough search of his property yielded no results. Leaving the investigation at a standstill, the only remaining action for the police was to send the electrical tape they had found for lab analysis. This type of tape was quite specific and difficult to find. It was not available in regular stores or online. In 2006, only 3 nearby companies used it, one of which was an aircraft parts plant where Matthew works. The electrical tape found on Alexandra's face had the same adhesive base, which could indicate the real killer. The police decided to contact Matthew's relatives again, and they uncovered important information. Matthew's brother revealed that he had a fierce temper and a potential motive against Alexandra. They discovered that, in 2002, he had given Alexandra his Nissan car and later lent her $2. She broke up with him in January 2004 while he was in prison. and she refused to return anything. It made him very angry. On June 14, detectives re-interrogated the suspect, highlighting the inconsistencies in his story. But Matthew managed to explain each of the disputed points, leaving the police with no new evidence. It wasn't until the end of the year that the DNA test results were available. The tests revealed that all the blood in the basement belonged solely to Alexandra. The blood droplets found in the bathroom were more special, as they belonged to her and a man. However, the concentration was too low to extract precise DNA profiles based on the results of the examination. Experts were able to establish that the killer was a black man. The hair found on Alexandra's hand could not be identified, and none of the fingerprints collected at the crime scene matched the suspects. Additionally, the specific shoe print could not be traced. Consequently, the investigation reached another standstill. A reward of $50 was offered for any information that could help advance the case. In 2010, authorities decided to reach out to prisoners. A photo of Alexandra was shared with correctional facilities. In September 2011, a prisoner named Paula contacted the Milford Police Department. She revealed that her former cellmate, Christopher Richards, had been in a relationship with Alexandra for 2 years before her death. Paula noted that they were together during the time between Alexandra's breakup with Matthew and the start of her relationship with Jason. Surprisingly, this relationship was unknown to others. When Alexandra informed Christopher's about their breakup, he was in prison. He became very angry and told his cellmate that he wanted to kill her once he was released. An investigation was launched to look into the situation, and they was discovered that the person who contacted the police had lied. Christopher did not know Alexandra, and there had been no communication between them, which would be unusual in a 2-year relationship. It seemed likely that this prisoner was trying to frame his cellmate. 2 weeks later, a bus driver named Jeremy, who had been friends with Alexandra for a long time, came forward with information. He reported that he had witnessed Alexandra receiving a threatening text from a man named Donovan. Donovan demanded repayment of money that Alexandra had lent him and threatened to kill her if she did not pay him back. Jeremy stated that this occurred just 2 weeks before her death. However, it appeared that Alexandra did not take these threats seriously. Ultimately, this claim was also found to be false. 6 years later, in August 2012, detectives finally received crucial information. Anthony Pugh, Matthew's cousin, reached out to the police station. He revealed details about a gifted car and the $2 that Alexandra had borrowed from her brother. His long story began back in 1993, when Matthew involved him in a criminal scheme. Both were later imprisoned for their actions, and, after being released in 2005 and 2006, they found jobs at the same plant, although they maintained a good relationship. A year later, Matthew betrayed Anthony, leading to Anthony's imprisonment. So, Anthony decided to take revenge by sharing the truth. Anthony disclosed that when Matthew broke up with Alexandra, he became obsessed with her and even considered killing her. Matthew planned to inject her with a lethal dose of drugs to make it look like an accidental overdose. However, upon learning about her new relationship, he changed his mind and opted for a more violent method of murder. The brothers worked at the same aircraft factory where Matthew stole gloves and special tape to commit a crime. Police believe he wanted to profit from this information, and he later admitted it directly. Anthony sought not only $50, but also sought revenge on his brother. When the information was verified, it was found that during the initial data analysis, the police overlooked that Matthew was indeed in the area near Milford at around 11.47, but left at 12.07. He returned and stayed at the scene for over an hour. Ultimately, the police had strong grounds to arrest Matthew and file charges against him. On August 24, 2012, Matthew Pugh was charged with first-degree murder and home invasion. However, at that time, he was already in prison for assaulting a woman in 2008. He threatened the victim with a weapon and stole her purse when she tried to resist. He's attacked her in the arm. The prosecutor's office found out that the problems with Matthew began after Alexandra wrote to the prison that she wanted to break up, according to cellmates. He was obsessed with her. In response, he wrote an 8-page letter over a couple of months, of course. He was angry because of these events, but after leaving prison, he did not show any aggression towards his ex. He started a relationship and even had a child. But at the same time, Matthew, all this time, hatched a plan. 3 years later, in February 2015, Matthew appeared in court. The prosecution claimed that the guy committed a deliberate massacre on the basis of jealousy. The lawyer insisted that the client was not involved in the murder because there was no direct evidence in the form of DNA and fingerprints at the crime scene. The situation for Matthew became completely stalemate when he began to answer the prosecution's questions. He desperately tried to prove his innocence, but it all didn't seem very plausible. Besides, his brother was testifying against him. The jury went to pass sentence. It was really not easy. In this complicated story, there were many blank spots, and many considered the accused a pathological liar. It was even necessary to ask the court to repeat Matthew's story only 3 days later. The jury found him guilty of first-degree murder and trespassing. He was sentenced to 60 years in prison for murder and another 20 for trespassing. The Alexandra Dukay case is a heartbreaking and complex one that leaves many unanswered questions, from the tangled relationships between Alexandra and those around her to the doubts about who took her life. The case remains one of the most controversial and haunting in Milford, Connecticut, although the killer, Matthew Pugh, has been convicted. Stories of motives, complicated relationships, and unclear details continue to haunt the public. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Bill Lanway and Holly Williams. In the early morning hours of March 12, 2020, a man called the police and reported that he had seen a car roll down the embankment and hit a tree at a construction site in southwestern Tennessee, USA. The witness was concerned that there might be injured people inside. He noticed 2 people in the car, but could not clearly identify. He believed there was a man and a woman inside. While waiting for the police and ambulance to arrive, he moved closer to the car. The witness said that neither person showed any signs of life. However, he noticed something unusual about their position in the car. Both victims were sitting in the back seat, indicating that they were not the drivers. It appeared that they had been thrown into the car and then pushed off the road. When the ambulance and police arrived, they found a man and a woman inside the car. The circumstances surrounding the tragedy did not match a typical car accident. Meanwhile, the car accelerated as it went down the embankment and the airbag deployed when it hit a tree. Forensic experts examined the evidence found in the cabin. The marks were found to be unusual for a typical car crash, and no documents were found among the victims' belongings in the forensic lab. They quickly identified the victims as Holly Williams, 30, and her ex-boyfriend, Bill Lanway, 36. The police ran their background checks and discovered that just a week before their deaths, Bill had been arrested for assault and was facing domestic violence charges. Holly filed a lawsuit against him. Holly had been the victim of manipulation that escalated into violence and physical abuse. After Bill hit her in December, they broke up. Holly's decision to end the relationship angers Bill, who begins stalking and threatening her. Leading to several violent confrontations, Holly becomes increasingly fearful for her life. One day, after returning from work, she discovers her dog dead, although she cannot prove that Bill was responsible for the animal's death. She believes he was involved. Their relationship is extremely abusive. With Bill resorting to violence to resolve conflicts, the couple had a history of disagreements and breakups throughout their relationship. But Bill always manages to convince Holly to come back to him. He uses the usual tactics, such as promises to change, apologies, and gifts. When police interviewed people close to Bill, many described him as a difficult person with a quick temper. It was suggested that his actions were considered a potential motive for his death. He may have angered someone or provoked violence, however. This did not clarify the circumstances surrounding Holly's death. Holly was very different from Bill. She was calm and avoided conflict. Furthermore, Holly and Bill had not been in contact recently, making it unclear why they were together at the time. It was discovered that their relationship had become increasingly strained, to the point that Holly had installed multiple surveillance cameras in her home. This seemed to be related to Bill's stalking, but the police soon discovered surprising details. The police reviewed the surveillance camera footage and discovered that shortly before that tragic evening, Bill had been seen wandering around the area near his home. He appeared to be searching for something for a long time, but it was unclear what his intentions were, however. A closer look at the video revealed that Bill and Holly had been together the evening before the murder. The pair were talking calmly, suggesting that their relationship may have improved by that time. The murder weapon was not found in the car, and Bill and Holly did not have any personal belongings with them. There were no cell phones, money, or papers. All of these items were found at their home. They may have been kidnapped and murdered, so there were no belongings with them. The police quickly began to support this theory. If Bill had actually harmed Holly, he could not have inflicted the second wounds. Because each bullet was fatal on the spot, it was clear that a third person was involved in the crime. But no traces or fingerprints were found in the victims' cars. When reviewing security camera footage from Holly's home, police discovered that several strangers had entered her home while she was away. Shortly before her death, the intruders were dressed in black and had their faces covered. It was unclear what they were looking for, as nothing appeared to have been stolen. Despite Holly being wealthy and owning many valuables, the intruders spent a considerable amount of time checking the apartment and even attempted to disable one of the cameras. Police suspect that Holly may have been involved in illegal activities, such as drug dealing or organized crime. It is possible that she had been relevant with a dangerous group of people and that the intruders were looking for revenge, not theft. When Holly returned home, the intruders had left. Holly changed the locks the next morning. When knowing that someone had broken into her home, she was clearly shaken by the encounter, however. As police probed deeper into her daily activities, they uncovered information that might explain Holly's fear. After her shift at the beauty salon, she worked for a prostitution agency called Layla Love for a long time. She worked as a call girl, servicing wealthy men. The police discovered that Holly had been a prostitute since she was 18, meaning she had been doing it for half her life, although she earned a decent income. She also had enemies, stalkers, and jealous people. A big problem for Holly was that she did not hide her profession, although she did not tell everyone she met. Her friends and her boyfriend, Bill, knew about her work. From the beginning of their relationship, Holly decided to continue her career as a prostitute because she earned a substantial income. She believed that her job was purely for money and did not involve any emotional relationships with the men she dated. Holly was open about her lifestyle, however. It was clear that her work could attract the attention of dangerous people. Police investigating the case released photos of all the men seen in Holly's home. Unfortunately, the photos were of poor quality and did not provide any useful information. Police then examined Bill and Holly's cell phones at the same time. They discovered that both phones had called the same number multiple times shortly before the tragedy. However, they were unable to verify this information, as the calls were made through an internet messaging application using a fake account, making it difficult to determine the true owner of the phone number. The police had to put considerable effort into uncovering the information, which required them to contact the FBI. They eventually identified a suspect, an account named Jimmy Green. Police traced an IP address that led them to Jim Green's real name, Adam Carey. At the time of the double murder, he was a 30-year-old man living in North Carolina. He is a former Marine who received special training after leaving the military. He works in the private security industry and is essentially a mercenary. Adam was previously arrested for impersonating a police officer during a police search. They discovered a large cache of weapons, stun grenades, and explosives, indicating that he was preparing for a serious conflict despite the severity of his actions. He was sentenced to only 4 months in prison, which was a very light sentence. Adam was one of 3 men caught on surveillance cameras in Holly's apartment. Initially, the police were investigating whether he had any connection to Holly. Adam was officially in the Marine Corps and served in the Special Forces. In addition, he has significant experience protecting high-ranking officials. Often, in difficult situations, he is proficient in a variety of weapons and combat techniques, making him extremely dangerous. Police located Adam and brought him in for questioning. Under pressure from the police, he eventually began to reveal information about the other members of the group that had broken into Holly's home. The mastermind behind the operation was Gilad Peled, 47, a former member of the Marine Corps Special Operations Group who also owned a security company. The third member of the trio was Brian Brockway, 40, a mercenary from Austin, Texas. Also a former Marine, police believe that Gilad hired Brian and Adam to kill Holly. However, it was unusual for a highly trained mercenary to take on such a small task. Despite his military background and ability to handle dangerous missions, he confessed that the original plan was much more violent, with the main goal being kidnapping, because the mercenaries were involved in the killing of civilians. Other FBI agents, including high-ranking officials, joined the investigation. It appeared that the situation might be part of a larger and more complex plot, and that the suspect was likely lying and trying to delay the investigation. Multiple communications were found during this time. The 2 suspects tracked their targets. After completing the mission and ensuring that Bill and Holly were dead, Adam and Brian reported the situation to Gilad, and they traveled to Austin, Texas, where Gilad was waiting for them at the security agency. Gilad had lived in Austin for many years and owned a house in one of the suburbs. He returned from Israel and founded a security company. After a long career protecting high-ranking officials and celebrities, Adam continued this work in Hollywood. They all knew each other and maintained contact, collaborating on various missions through the security agency. Shortly before the tragic events, Gilad found a client named Eric Mond. Eric was a famous and wealthy man living in Texas. He ran a car dealership founded by his grandfather and sought protection for himself and his son, Charles Munt. After checking, it was confirmed that Eric was a successful businessman, a car dealer, and a wealthy resident of Austin. He owned a luxury home worth $5 million, where he lived with his wife and 2 children. One of his sons was studying at the University of Nashville in early 2020. Eric planned to visit his son. He came with Adam and stayed at one of the most expensive hotels in the city. Later, the police discovered that Eric had invited Holly to his room. He found her online and arranged this meeting. It wasn't their first time. Eric met Holly regularly under the pretext of visiting his son, and they communicated via email. Holly then arrived as planned, and Eric and Holly spent the night together at the hotel. Eric was smitten with her. After Eric returns to Texas, he suddenly receives a threatening text message from a man demanding $25 to keep quiet. The man's threat implies that Eric's relationship with Holly will be revealed to his wife if he doesn't pay. Eric is a famous and wealthy man. He wants to keep his personal mistakes a secret to protect his family and reputation. So, Eric decides to ask Gilad for help. Eric believes that Holly is blackmailing him, and Eric wants to stop her from doing so. Gilad contacts friends at a private security company to investigate the blackmail, and they find out that Bill are involved in the case. Bill hacks into one of Holly's accounts and discovers her relationship with a wealthy man named Eric. He learns about Holly's hotel trip with Eric and becomes extremely angry, out of jealousy. He plotted to harm Holly in revenge, while also seeking to profit from the situation. When he discovered Eric, he attacked Holly and then attempted to blackmail her for $25 without hesitation. The criminals proposed to kill Bill and Holly. They believed that it would be safer to eliminate Holly, although the task force demanded a much higher sum for the mission than Bill the blackmailer. Eric agreed. One evening in March, Holly and Bill were seen leaving the house. They got into a car, but were ambushed. As soon as Bill started the engine, several attackers surrounded the car. The couple were then forced into the car and kidnapped by the attackers. Brian and Adam drove to a nearby construction site, where they killed Holly and Bill and abandoned the car. As the investigation unfolded, the police tapped Adam and Brian's phones, eventually leading to confessions from all of the perpetrators involved. Notably, they showed no remorse for their actions after the investigation. It was learned that Eric had paid Gilad $750. Eventually, Brian, Adam, and Gilad were all arrested. The police then asked Gilad to contact Eric. As the police hoped this might lead to a confession from Eric, Gilad then spoke to Eric and made up a story that one of his partners had discovered Eric's identity and was demanding another $25. Eric offered to get rid of the new blackmailer in the same way Gilad had recently dealt with Bill and Holly. Eric then became extremely angry and shouted into the phone. These pieces of evidence provided valuable information to the investigation. It was clear from Eric's words that the person who ordered the killing of Bill and Holly was willing to agree to kill again, just to ensure his own safety. Holly was arrested shortly after. FBI agents discovered that the plot began in February of last year. They confirmed the facts of the withdrawals and transfers. Supported by recordings of the participants' confessions, on March 5, Eric Mound made an advance payment of $15 to Gilad, who was managing the killer's account, on March 9, and within 3 days, $150 had been transferred to the account. This transfer suggested that the violent plan was about to be carried out. Agents discovered that Eric had sent a total of about $750 to the killers. Eric insisted that he never intended to participate in a murder plot. He claimed that he was a victim of blackmail and could not bear to confront his attacker. His main concern was to protect himself and his family. Eric maintained that he did not order anyone to be killed and blamed the crimes on the incompetence of his mercenaries. After a hearing, the jury sentenced Eric Mond, Adam Carey, Brian Brockway, and led to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Hey detectives, welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Annie Casperac. Annie Casperac was born on January 10, 1997, into a family that lacked love. Her parents suffered from severe drug addiction and mental health issues. Therefore, her living conditions since childhood have always been difficult. At a young age, she was removed from her parents' care and placed with a new family. However, things did not go smoothly, and her foster parents abandoned her just like her biological parents. As a result, by the age of 9, she had lived in 9 different families. Annie felt unwelcome and alone in the world, and her life in the orphanage had made her distrustful of people. Despite this, she held on to the hope of finding a loving family, one that would embrace her and provide the love she longed for. She dreamt of having a dad and mom who would care for her, accept her as their own after Annie was returned by her ninth family. She went to an orphanage where she met Annie Casperac. Veronica worked in Utah's social services, focused on finding suitable homes for children who had been cruelly treated. She was known as a very caring worker. For child and family protection services, she treated everyone she helped with genuine love. Upon meeting Annie, she was immediately touched by the girl's story. Annie told of being physically abused as a child. She lived in a cruel, unstable family, which had a great impact on her psychology. Veronica was moved to tears as she listened to her story. Veronica felt that life was unfair to she, and her tragedy touched Veronica's heart. As a result, Veronica and her relationship became close and warm. Veronica began visiting she regularly to provide her with emotional support. In January 2007, while 6 months pregnant, Veronica shared Annie's story with her husband, Dennis, who also longed for children. They decided to adopt Annie and welcome her into their family. Veronica and Dennis were kind and decent people, which allowed them to carry out their plans smoothly. Annie moved in with their family in the suburbs of Salt Lake City, Utah, a few months later. Veronica gave birth to twins, both boys. By this time, all the bureaucratic hurdles related to Annie's adoption had been resolved, and she was warmly welcomed into the family. Even though this was her 10th time being adopted, she was full of enthusiasm and hope that the hardships of her life were behind her. She believed that now she would experience the love of her parents. Now that Annie had a home, wonderful parents, and 2 younger brothers, she embraced her role as a caring older sister. She happily babysat her younger siblings and helps her foster mother. Veronica, her brothers take up most of her free time, and she felt fulfilled in this new role. She tries to broaden their horizons and teach them new things every day. She sincerely loved her new brothers, and they returned her affection. Not long after, Annie experienced her first trip to the beach. It was a family holiday before Christmas, and Veronica and Dennis organized a wonderful celebration for their children. They spent most of their time opening gifts. But during this period, tensions began to arise within the family. Veronica and Dennis believed that having children would strengthen their relationship and help them learn new aspects of family life. Unfortunately, this was not the case. After a while, Veronica and Dennis's family had a falling out, which led to many difficulties. Veronica, who had witnessed similar situations in the past, feared that her family might fall apart again, even after their divorce. Dennis kept a good relationship with Veronica and remained involved in raising their children, including their adopted daughter, Annie. Fortunately, Annie's fears of returning to the orphanage did not come true. Meanwhile, Veronica started new relationships and eventually remarried. Her new partner, James, turned out to be a loving and caring husband and father. Just like Dennis, he quickly bonded with Annie and treated her as if she were his own daughter. Family affection and warmth gradually returned to their lives, and the family moved to a peaceful small town in Utah called Riverton. It was an ideal place to start a new life. But this story would not have a happy ending. James admits, Annie has special gifts. She could convince anyone to do anything, especially when it came to asking for gifts. One day, she saw a pair of red shoes in a store she really liked, and she begged James to buy them, and he couldn't refuse. At this time, 15 years old, Annie was in her first year at the academy. She was an outstanding student, well liked by her teachers. She dreams of becoming a pediatrician. Due to her life experiences as a child, she always wanted to help other children. Veronica, her adoptive mother, was a guiding light for her, transforming her life. She dreamed of emulating her mother. By dedicating her life to helping others, she even imagined adopting more children to study with them at home and support them during this time. Annie also had her first love. These feelings came on suddenly, and she embraced them wholeheartedly. On the evening of March 10, 2012, she stayed home to look after her younger brothers. Because Veronica and James had gone out for dinner, this was a romantic date that they had long awaited and planned. When Veronica and James returned home, everything appeared normal. The only thing Veronica noticed was that Annie had changed from her usual shorts into jeans, which she thought was likely due to the chill, however. She didn't think much of it. Eventually, she decided to take a shower, while Annie went into her room to listen to music. After she finished her shower, she went into the room to check on Annie, but found it empty. She couldn't find her daughter in the house, worried. Veronica and James began looking for clues to see where Annie had gone. James carefully inspected her room and discovered a note under her pillow. In the note, she explained that she could no longer stay at home and had chosen to run away to California with her boyfriend. She admitted that she was pregnant and asked her parents not to look for her or report her missing to the police. This shocked the family. They could not believe that this was happening to them, so they continued to search for information. A few months before these incidents, Annie began having sex as the escape date approached. She noticed strange changes in her body. She felt weak, nauseous, and dizzy. Occasionally, she felt unwell for no apparent reason. Eventually, she thought she was pregnant, but when she took a pregnancy test, she got a negative result. The pregnancy test results show that Annie is not pregnant, which worries her because she has been mentally preparing to become a mother. Despite this, her decision to leave seemed strange and surprised her parents. Veronica and James, they had always provided her with love and support, and she appeared happy in their family. Often caring for her younger brothers, they felt her decision to leave was sudden and unprepared, as she had not shared with them her current situation or future plans. Naturally, her parents, Veronica and James, were concerned about her leaving. With her phone turned off, they quickly reached out to the police for help. Their biggest concern was who she ran away with. The police and her parents began contacting her close friends. While still attempting to reach her by phone, however, she ignored all their calls and messages. Annie's boyfriend was Darwin Christopher Bagshaw. They first met during a math class at school and quickly developed an attraction. Their secret relationship lasted a year and a half before it was discovered. It was surprising that Annie's parents were unaware of her feelings, as she had kept her romance hidden from them. According to her best friend, she was deeply infatuated with Darwin and feared losing him. During their time together, their group of friends changed, as Veronica and James were unaware of the new friends Annie made. Then, Veronica managed to reach Darwin, suspecting that he might have run away with her daughter, Annie. Everyone was surprised when Darwin declared that he did not know where Annie was. He revealed that their relationship had ended, and at the time, she disappeared. She was dating someone new named LJ. Veronica and James were completely unfamiliar with LJ. They had never heard of him, while Veronica was reaching out to Annie's friends and acquaintances to learn more about him. James managed to track Annie's mobile phone using an app. He monitored its movement in real time on a map for a while. The phone was moving quickly. It was clear that Annie was not driving, but after a while of observation, the signal suddenly stopped and then disappeared. Veronica and James are unable to contact Annie until now. She had ignored all their attempts to contact her. They hurried to the store, searched the supermarket, and asked everyone if they had seen her. They showed photos of her, but no one recognized her. After reviewing the security camera footage, they still couldn't find her. Veronica continued to call out to her daughter, but she still did not respond. They are very worried, but still hope that everything will be fine with their daughter and wish for her to come home. On March 11, the day after Annie went missing, a man contacted the police. He noticed blood on the riverbank and initially thought it was from a wounded wild animal. When he got closer, he saw another pool of blood and a red shoe nearby. He found this suspicious, so he called the police. Forensic experts arrived at the scene and collected samples for analysis. The results showed that the samples belonged to the same person, because the last location Annie was seen coincided with where the blood was found. Investigators became suspicious. A search operation was soon organized. Divers were mobilized to examine the river, while others searched the shoreline. A rescue helicopter was also dispatched a few kilometers north of where the shoe was found. A girl in a red dress was found floating face down in the water when the search party pulled her body from the water. They were unable to identify her. Her face was so badly disfigured that a forensic examination was needed to identify her. Most of her facial bones were crushed, and her nose was almost gone. The cause of death was determined to be multiple blows to the head with a blunt object, and that she had died the night she went missing. It was clear that she had died tragically after the body was discovered. Police reported through the media that they had found a girl of Asian descent with dark hair, believed to be under 20. When Veronica and James saw the news, they quickly recognized that it was their daughter, Annie. Although physical features do not match Annie's, but James recognized the red shoes he had given his daughter before she disappeared. Additionally, Veronica noted that the deceased wore a red dress that perfectly matched the one missing from their home. Veronica and James initially hoped it was just a coincidence and that the police had found another victim, but they felt uneasy. Identifying the body took time. It was determined that the victim wore braces and had her gallbladder removed, which matched Annie's details perfectly. Ultimately, dental records and DNA analysis confirmed that the body was Annie's at that moment. Any hope of Annie returning home vanished, and her parents were devastated afterward. Detectives went to Annie's home to search her room. They looked for any evidence that might help identify the criminal. During the search, they discovered a diary in which she wrote about her on and off relationship with Darwin on her 15th birthday. Annie expressed her desire to have children, yearning to be a young mother and care for her child. On March 1, 2012, she wrote that she was pregnant by Darwin. However, she later regretted it when a pregnancy test came back negative. She explained that she had been using birth control pills. The autopsy confirmed that she had never been pregnant. Further entries in her diary showed that she was wrong and just wanted to believe in her dream. She hoped this would help keep Darwin by her side, but he had no intention of building a real family with her. Veronica and James informed the police about their conversation with Darwin on March 14. Detectives spoke with Darwin. He was accompanied by his father, Spencer. He was aware of the rumors about Annie's pregnancy, but insisted he could not be the father. He believed that she had become pregnant by LJ, who was 17 at the time. He did not know LJ personally, but described LJ based on rumors, saying LJ was a man of bad reputation. However, he was unable to provide any further information to the police. The police also questioned Darwin about his whereabouts during Annie's disappearance. He claimed to have an alibi, stating he was at his grandmother Wilma's house. He mentioned that he briefly visited a friend that evening, but returned home when he found him not there. His grandmother verified his account. Additionally, he agreed to provide DNA samples from the clothes and shoes he wore on the night of the incident. When he handed over his sneakers, he mentioned that there might be some of Annie's blood on them because her nose was bleeding during their last meeting and stuck to his shoe. Her father was present and confirmed his statement. As a result, he was confirmed to have an alibi and was removed from the list of suspects. Spencer, Darwin's father, was asked to provide information about the relationship between Darwin and Annie. The detectives specifically wanted to know about someone named LJ. He did recall a message he received through social media back in November that was sent from Annie's account, but signed by LJ. At the time, he thought the message seemed odd. Additionally, he has heard disturbing rumors about LJ, suggesting that LJ may be involved in a gang or even have committed murder. On March 15, Spencer again contacts the police to report that a mysterious individual named LJ has threatened to kill his son, Darwin. Darwin informed he about the threat when he returned from work, prompting he to report it to the police immediately. At a press conference, the authorities shared the available information. They appealed to the public for any tips that could aid in capturing the criminal. Unfortunately, this did not advance the investigation. The situation changed when a witness named Joanna Franklin contacted the police. She was in custody for fraud, but claimed to know LJ. She provided a brief description of LJ, saying he was a short man, about 20 years old. She also said she had more information about the case, but would only share it if the police dropped the charges against her. Ultimately, the police were forced to accept her request. Joanna then revealed that on the night of the murder, Annie and LG went to Daniel Robert Ferry's house. Daniel had a criminal record and was at the time engaged in the distribution of illegal substances. She was present that evening and witnessed LG and Annie go to the bathroom together, where they had sex. Afterward, they returned. Daniel then approached Annie and asked her to have sex with him. She laughed, thinking it was a joke, but then refused him. In anger, he grabbed her head and slammed her against the wall, causing blood to splatter all over the wallpaper. She collapsed onto the carpet, blood flowing from her broken nose, mouth, and ears. Daniel did not stop there. He kicked her several times, threatening that no one was allowed to laugh at him. She lay unconscious. Joanna went to check her pulse and saw that she was still alive, but Joanna did nothing. Because Joanna was afraid, Joanna noticed that Annie was still on the floor, her face very pale, but she was still breathing. The other teenagers at the party believed she was dead and showed no concern for her well-being. LJ returned to the room and saw the bloody scene. Daniel explained that he had taught Annie a lesson for laughing at him. LJ reacted calmly to Daniel's actions, and they began discussing what to do with Annie's body. Joanna watched as they wrapped she in a large towel, loaded her into a car, and drove away. A few hours later, they returned without Annie. When asked about Annie's, they claimed they had gone swimming near the canyon, saying that she had regained consciousness but then fought with them and ran away. Joanna and the others realized this was a lie and understood they had disposed of her body. The police asked Joanna about Annie's clothing. Joanna described she as wearing a lot of red, shoes and a dress. Coincides with how she was discovered. To verify Joanna's statement, investigators went to the home of dealer Daniel. He denied any involvement in the crime and claimed he had not harassed or harmed anyone. Detectives obtained a search warrant for his house, anticipating they would find blood on the walls and carpet. However, they discovered that the wall Joanna mentioned had been recently painted, and the carpet was missing, according to police experience. It appeared that the house had been renovated in a suspicious manner. During a thorough examination, forensic scientists discovered stains on the floor that looked like blood. As they continued their investigation, they became increasingly convinced that Joanna was telling the truth. Daniel was arrested and brought in for questioning. Witness testimony confirmed that Daniel was indeed a gang member and had a criminal record for drug trafficking. During the interrogation, he was accompanied by his lawyer. He denied knowing LJ and Annie. Even when shown a photograph of her, he insisted he did not know her name and maintained that he did not kill her. Despite Daniel's convincing testimony, detectives still suspected his involvement in Annie's murder. The lab results from stains collected at his house revealed they were not blood, but sauce. Aside from Joanna's testimony, there was no evidence to prove his guilt, forcing the detectives to release him. Later, they discovered that, during this time, he committed another crime. He may have been involved in an attack and kidnapping that took place in a nearby city, raising the authorities' suspicions even further. To clarify Daniel's whereabouts, authorities examined location data from his phone. The data showed that on March 10, the day Annie was murdered, he was in another city. After months of searching for evidence, investigators could not connect him to the crime, leading to his removal from the suspect list. Ultimately, Daniel confessed to the kidnapping and assault of another person, which he committed with a friend around the same time as Annie's murder. Proving they could not have been in two places at once, this indicated that they were not involved in Annie's death. The police reinterrogated Joanna. She admitted that she had made up the story. She wanted revenge on Daniel and knew that on the night of Annie's murder, he had kidnapped someone else. Her accusation misled the police, diverting their focus and allowing the real culprit to evade justice. Her lie wasted over a year of police investigation. Additionally, there were no leads on LJ, who had vanished without a trace, tragically. The detective in charge of the case was killed while on duty, and the investigation was handed over to a new officer. Unfortunately, significant information was lost with the deceased detective. In this context, Annie's family felt deeply affected and decided to offer a reward for anyone who could provide information leading to the arrest of the killer. A new investigator has begun to review all documents related to the case. He reread Annie's diary and noticed that a couple of months before her death, she had an intimate relationship with Darwin. Afterward, she had thought she might be pregnant, but that turned out to be a misunderstanding. It seemed that she wanted to use the child to keep Darwin with her, which could have been the motive for the murder. On the night of the murder, they had multiple calls with each other. That evening, her phone received 3 calls from an unknown number. The phone companies have been monitoring these calls and discovered that they came from Darwin's number. It seemed that Annie and Darwin had had an argument and were trying to mend their relationship over the phone. The police decide to reconsider Darwin's alibi, as he is the prime suspect and has a motive for the crime by tracking mobile calls. They discovered that his grandmother and father were lying. He was not with them that evening. They were only trying to corroborate his alibi and protect him. Furthermore, there was a lot of blood on his shoes, which made people even more suspicious of him. Meanwhile, his family seemed to be protecting him. After speaking with Darwin's father, Spencer, who was pressured by the detectives, he admitted that he had lied to the police 2 years ago. Upon reviewing messages between he and Darwin, they discover that Darwin asked him to create a false alibi to fool the police. The new investigator was surprised to learn that some friends referred to Darwin as Eldzay. The key piece of evidence against Darwin came from his cell phone location data. At the time of Annie's murder, it showed that he was at the riverbank where the body was found. This seemed to confirm that the case was finally solved. At the time, he was living with his mother in Colorado, prompting police to arrange an interview with him. When detectives approached him at the school, he appeared surprised. He refused to speak to them without a lawyer. He was extradited back to Utah in October 2014. Although he did not cooperate with the police, there was enough evidence to press charges against him, and his trial was set for March 2015. According to state law, Dennis was supposed to be tried as a minor, which would have allowed him to be released by the time he turned 21. However, this was not permissible given the seriousness of the crime. Therefore, the prosecution, with the backing of Annie's family, requested that he be tried as an adult. He was held in prison while awaiting trial. During this time, he confided in a fellow inmate, revealing the disturbing details of the murder. In his confession, Darwin explained that he had believed for a long time that Annie was pregnant. He was distressed at the thought of becoming a father at such a young age, especially since he had not yet completed school. To get out of this situation, he planned to kill Annie and suggested they meet by the river to discuss running away from home. She naively believed his lie when she arrived at their meeting place. She was dressed very beautifully. Darwin then attacked her, striking her in the face with a shovel multiple times. After she fell, he continued to hit her with the shovel. Finally, he placed the flat side of the shovel on her head and jumped on it until she no longer showed any signs of life. Experts confirmed that the injuries on she matched the actions described by Darwin. After Darwin confessed to the crime, the court decided to try him as an adult. Because his actions were so heinous, he was charged with first-degree murder. The defense lawyer argued that he did not understand his actions and felt remorse. However, Annie's family believed that he was just trying to gain sympathy to receive a lighter sentence. In the end, Darwin Christopher Bagshaw was sentenced to life in prison. With the possibility of parole after 15 years, he will be eligible for parole in 2034. Additionally, his father and grandmother face charges of perjury and obstruction of justice, each receiving a 2 years prison sentence. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case, the case of Celeste Beard. Behind the doors of a lavish Texas mansion, where life seemed filled with happiness and wealth. A dark conspiracy led to the tragic death of Stephen Beard, a respected millionaire. A horrific event shattered the peace, revealing shocking secrets about love, betrayal, and bottomless greed. Austin is the capital of Texas, USA, and has a population of around 1 million people. A large portion of this population consists of students and employees from local colleges. Many graduates choose to stay in the area to work in high-tech industries. Similar to those found in Silicon Valley, Stephen Beard moved to Austin with his wife in 2008 after winning a contract with an independent television company. At that time, he had no idea of the remarkable success that lay ahead for him, nor the tragic events that would later unfold in his life. In 1924, in Dallas, Texas, he was close to his mother but did not know his father. After finishing high school, he pursued a career in engineering. However, during the post-war years, he faced significant challenges in finding a job. Eventually, he secured a position as a shoe salesman in Dallas, earning a modest salary of $15 a week despite the low pay. He later regarded this job as his greatest success because it was where he met his future wife, Elise, a model. They made a vibrant and harmonious couple. Elise was slender and petite, but enjoyed activities like fishing and horseback riding, which were considered more masculine. Both shared a boundless energy, making them well-suited for each other. Shortly after these events, Stephen landed his dream job at a radio station in Dallas. He worked hard to rise from a cleaner to a leading advertising agent, eventually becoming a television program producer and a highly sought-after expert in his field. While Stephen advanced in his career, Elise focused on being a housewife and raising their 3 children. Their first daughter was born when Stephen was 48. During this time, Stephen became a symbol of success, engaging in real estate, advertising, and car sales, which allowed him to earn money quickly. He made his first million. But his greatest achievement came when he established his own television company. The couple relocated to Austin and quickly purchased a mansion that offered breathtaking views of the city. He selected one of the priciest neighborhoods, providing them with a significant degree of privacy that occasionally felt excessive. They embraced a luxurious family life in their nearly 5-square-meter home. The couple also became members of a country club, which had a membership fee of $50 even back then. By this time, Stephen and Elise had no financial concerns, and that amount was merely a small expense for them. At this time, Stephen gained significant weight. He humorously related his weight gain to his lifestyle and financial situation. He enjoyed indulging in food and drinks while living a mostly inactive life, while his wife remained focused on maintaining her health and fitness. Beginning in 1986, Stephen's media business started to thrive. However, the family faced a tragic event when, in 1993, Elise was diagnosed with a malignant brain tumor. This news devastated them all throughout her chemotherapy and radiation treatment. Stephen remained by Elise's side, providing her with unwavering support. In the summer of that year, she went into remission, and they took a cruise to celebrate their 45th anniversary. But not long after, she passed away. Family meant everything to Stephen, and he had been without Elise for a long time. Each day, he visited the Austin Country Club alone, drank several strong drinks, had dinner, and then returned to his mansion. Even though there were maids and nannies in the house to help with chores and look after the children, he felt overwhelmed and lonely. His relatives thought he needed a new wife or someone to help organize his life. Soon, Stephen met Celeste, a 30-year-old waitress at the country club. Attracted to her, he invited her to work as a housekeeper, and she happily accepted the offer. Celeste was born on February 13, 1963. In Los Angeles, her mother abandoned her shortly after birth, and she was quickly adopted by Edwin and Nancy Johnson. The couple had struggled with infertility and faced multiple miscarriages. so they decided to adopt a child from an orphanage to experience the joys of parenthood. During that time, in the USA, adoption was relatively straightforward. Over 4 years, they adopted 4 children, and Celeste was the second. She just 2 days old when they brought her home. Unfortunately, even after finding a family, her trials did not end. She said how her mother experienced depression and a nervous breakdown. One of her most terrifying memories was when her mother held the children's heads underwater in the bathtub, while Celeste stood by. Completely confused, Nancy claimed this was a way to rinse them off after washing, but Celeste perceived it very differently as the situation worsened. Her adoptive mother was hospitalized due to a nervous breakdown caused by diet pills and exhaustion. Overall, their relationship was poor. Celeste was initially very close to her father. However, she later accused him of molestation, claiming it happened when she was 11. However, Edwin maintained that these accusations were false. In high school, Celeste's adoptive parents separated, which caused her to become more distant and harsh towards those she cared about. Her mother and father fought for custody, with Edwin facing allegations of domestic violence and sexual harassment. Nancy was seen as a potential threat due to her mental health struggles during the custody trial. Celeste testified against her father, even alleging that he had once hit her in the face with a knife. Although she claimed the scar had faded over time, many found her story hard to believe. As her behavior at the time was erratic and aggressive, Celeste was referred to a psychiatrist, but the doctor could not determine the root of her issues. Ultimately, they concluded that she was simply going through a challenging phase typical of adolescence, influenced by hormonal changes throughout her life. She moved between different foster families. Despite facing challenges with her behavior, she was popular with boys, and she excelled in sports. Everyone recognized her as a lively teenager. Once she got her driver's license, she began speeding through her neighborhood recklessly. Her troubles continued, and at 15, she met a 17-year-old named Craig Bratcher at a bar. Shortly after their relationship began, she started skipping school and using drugs. Most of her time was spent hanging out with him at the beach. They eventually moved in together, and by 17, she became pregnant with twins. During this time, her tendency to lie became apparent. She told people that these children had been eagerly anticipated, but later expressed that her boyfriend was opposed to the pregnancy. She claimed to doctors that he had once struck her in the stomach, but later retracted that statement. Despite these inconsistencies, Celeste became engaged to her boyfriend on December 6, 1980, although doctors advised her to rest in bed because of the risk of losing the pregnancy. She persisted in living a carefree lifestyle. In 2008, she gave birth to twins, Jennifer and Christina. Several months prematurely, the babies spent approximately 3 months in the hospital on life support after returning home. The couple's relationship turned increasingly hostile. They maintained their reckless lifestyle, which led to more frequent arguments that escalated into fights. Celeste often found herself in conflict due to her fiery temper. At times, she harmed herself and then blamed Craig for domestic violence. Trying to rationalize her actions, she frequently referenced her past trauma, claiming she had been sexually abused as a child. However, her story changed over time. She began to allege that not just her father, but also her older brother had molested her. Many people were skeptical of Celeste's claims. Viewing her as a habitual liar, she reported Craig to the police for domestic violence after her husband found her in bed with a neighbor. In response, Craig threatened the couple with a weapon, which resulted in Craig serving 4 months in prison. Though no one was injured during the incident, Celeste secured a restraining order against Craig, and they divorced in May 1982 when their twins were just over a year old. Despite the accusations and the restraining order, Celeste frequently left the children with their biological father to attend various parties after the divorce. Celeste faced housing issues and moved in with a friend along with her children. However, She soon became frustrated with a neighbor, she thinks, who constantly bothered her children, which led to her being asked to leave during this time. Celeste's behavior became increasingly erratic. She frequently fabricated stories and even called the police for trivial reasons. For instance, she reported her wallet stolen, only to later discover it at home. It appeared that she was not very attentive to her children. As she spent most of her free time socializing with friends, she often left her children with acquaintances for several days, which ultimately resulted in her daughters being placed in foster care. Friends and family often excused her actions by attributing them to her youth and inexperience with motherhood. They said that Celeste received little support from her relatives and had a strained relationship with her mother, which ultimately contributed to her decision to abandon her children. After some time, she got back together with Craig. They moved in together and tried to live as a normal family, but her behavior did not improve. In 1985, she accused Craig of rape. This time, he was not accept the blame for her fabrications because he was facing a serious sentence. The situation hinged on a false statement made by one of the two children. From that point on, the trust of all her relatives and friends in Celeste was completely shattered. No one believed her anymore. Eventually, all her claims were questioned, including the rape allegations. As her father and brothers failed to confirm them, it seems she had planned to manipulate the situation from the beginning. In the following years, Celeste married twice and then divorced again. Her behavior did not change. She remained aggressive and deceitful during this time. She was diagnosed with a depressive disorder, despite undergoing treatment and taking medication. She saw little improvement and often experienced emotional breakdowns after ending relationships. Eventually, Celeste met a wealthy man named Jimmy Martinez. By this point, her children were already 11 years old. She fought with her ex-husband Craig for custody, as he believed she was an unfit mother and that the children were at risk. Craig won the custody battle, but Celeste tries to appear saddened by the loss of one of her daughters, Christina, with whom she had a closer bond. Although Craig tried to regain custody, Celeste resisted, and the twins returned to their chaotic lifestyle. However, this situation did not last long. As Celeste was summoned to Arizona on fraud charges, authorities discovered that Celeste had attempted to rob a couple who had briefly adopted her child. She tried to use her usual tactics to deflect blame, but she failed this time. Additionally, she had set her car on fire in the desert to collect insurance money. The victims discovered this and helped bring her to justice. Ultimately, her fraud was exposed. Fortunately for Celeste, she received a sympathetic judge who sentenced her to probation and a $20 fine. In exchange, she agreed to move to Texas and never returned to Arizona. Celeste moved in with Jimmy, and soon after, they got married. She took his last name. But Jimmy soon realized that she was accumulating a significant amount of debt, totaling tens of thousands of dollars. It was confusing for him because she was now his legal wife, and he didn't understand why this was happening. When he tried to clarify to the creditors that these debts were not his, he was met with accusations of sexual assault of Celeste. Additionally, Celeste stabbed herself in the wrist with scissors, seemingly trying to make it seem like she wanted to end her life in order to trap Jimmy in the process. In the next stage, Celeste found a job at the Austin Country Club. In the fall of 1990, she met a wealthy man named Stephen Beard and began working as a housekeeper in his home. This was surprising, as Celeste had no experience with household tasks. She didn't know how to cook, clean, or do laundry. However, she aimed to attach herself to a wealthy man to manage her lack of skills. She secretly relied on other maids to do the work without Stephen's knowledge. With her attractive appearance and feigned abilities, it didn't take long for Stephen to be drawn to her. After the loss of his beloved wife, Celeste quickly integrated into the millionaire's social circle and even joked with his friends about her role as a housekeeper, despite her lack of skills. While everyone laughed politely, they were well aware that Celeste was not truly suitable for Stephen. Celeste was openly disinterested in Stephen, telling her daughter Christina that the only reason she liked him was because he was wealthy. Despite this, she continued to fabricate stories about herself, claiming to be a certified accounting specialist. By this time, many people suspected that she had serious issues. Craig even tried to warn Stephen about her true nature. One day, when he received a call from Craig, he wanted to discuss their children. Craig took the opportunity to caution Stephen that Celeste was a very dangerous woman. However, Stephen was unwavering in his feelings. He saw Celeste as a source of light during a tough time in his life and was grateful for the happiness she brought him. Celeste significantly improved Stephen's life when his doctor informed him that he had an enlarged heart and was at high risk for a heart attack. She encouraged him to adopt a healthier diet and insisted on walking with him everywhere to increase his physical activity. Thanks to her support, he lost over 20 kg. This weight loss brought new vitality to him. He found it easier to move, and the chest pain he had suffered since his wife's death vanished. He also began spending more time with his children. Eventually, they got engaged. This development raised concerns among his friends, including a judge who suggested that Stephen should consider a marriage contract. Suspecting Celeste's intentions, the couple came to an agreement regarding their finances. At that time, Stephen's fortune was valued at $12 million if they separated. Stephen would keep all his real estate if Celeste stayed married to him for 3 years. She would receive $500 in case she remained with him until his death. She would get $1 million. Additionally, he gave her $500 as a wedding gift. Under these conditions, on February 18, 1995, Celeste married Stephen Beard, her fourth husband, in a ceremony at the Austin Country Club, where she had recently worked as a waitress. The event was not well received by everyone. Ira, one of Stephen and Christina's children, attended the wedding. The others chose not to attend. Believing the marriage was a disingenuous arrangement, Celeste and Stephen spent their honeymoon in New Orleans. In March 1995, when they returned, Christina moved in with them. Christina often witnessed her mother crushing pills and mixing them into her husband's food. Celeste claimed these were sleeping pills, allowing her to leave her husband at home and go out for fun. Many people knew she frequented clubs at night while her husband slept, but they kept it from Stephen to avoid upsetting him. However, he soon sensed something was off. Despite giving Celeste a limited budget, he quickly noticed that she had spent over $100 within just a month of their marriage. He was particularly alarmed by the disappearance of jewelry from the safe. A friend at the bank informed him that Celeste had actually stolen the jewelry belonging to his late wife, Elise. This revelation enraged him, leading him to decide to kick Celeste out of the house. In a state of despair, she started to defend her actions, stating that she owed $20 in Arizona and had taken the jewelry to settle the debt. Celeste assured him that she would return everything once her financial issues were resolved. At this time, Stephen found himself repeating the mistakes of previous men. He was deceived and manipulated, although out of protection for her. He ended up covering her insurance fraud and withdrew his divorce. Celeste was admitted to a psychiatric clinic, where she was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and given medication that she was required to take. However, she continued to lie. Celeste realized that she was dealing with a smart and experienced man, not a naive one. This meant she needed to be more careful and strategic than Stephen was used to. Her first goal is to convince her husband to buy the property, which would allow her to claim half. In the event of divorce, Celeste emphasized that she couldn't feel comfortable in a house purchased while Elise was still alive. Ultimately, Stephen agreed and sold the house. They moved to the lake house, which they planned to renovate with the help of a renowned architect. Stephen was involved in the project almost daily. Celeste kept pressuring her husband for more assets. At the start of 1996, Stephen met with his lawyer to revise their marriage contract. The new agreement stated that if he died, Celeste would get not only $1 million, but also half of their new mansion, while he supervised the construction. Celeste spent her time shopping and hardly visited the site, knowing she would receive a substantial payout upon her husband's death. She aimed to expedite that outcome. They had a daily routine of drinking together. He enjoyed high-quality alcohol, but she secretly replaced it with a cheaper, questionable drink. She even mixed in drugs, playfully referring to her concoction as a cemetery cocktail among her friends. Celeste was now waiting for her plan to unfold. In the meantime, her first husband was self-harm, and her second daughter moved in with her at around 3 a.m. on October 2, 1999. Stephen called 911. The 75-year-old man was clearly panicked and confused. He told the dispatcher that he did not want to die. From his words, the dispatcher realized that he had a serious injury. Stephen said he was holding his internal organs in place to prevent them from falling out. He was unable to explain how he got hurt. He had woken up in severe pain and urgently needed help. After reaching out to the dispatch service, he informed them that his wife, Celeste, was in a different part of the mansion. He requested that they ask her to come to him. However, when the dispatcher tried to contact her, there was no response. When the police arrived, no one answered the door. They circled the house and discovered a small patio behind glass doors. Inside, a man was sitting. He was holding a phone in one hand and gripping the door with the other. Right away, one of the officers smashed the glass door to enter the bedroom. Although Stephen was in very bad shape, he was still alive. It appeared that his stomach had been severely injured. Stephen denied having had a recent surgery and that the stitches could have come undone, but he could not explain what had actually happened. The police quickly called a rescue helicopter to take him to the hospital. As the police moved through the mansion to open the front door for the ambulance crew, they encountered Celeste. She explained that she woke up to the flashing lights of police cars. She had called the emergency services, but they informed her that Stephen had already reached out for help. Both Celeste and her daughters confirmed that Stephen had not undergone any recent surgeries, so his injuries could not be attributed to stitches that had ripped. One of the arriving officers attempted to reassure the family. He informed them of the emergency, and Celeste pleaded for her husband's life while their daughters tried to comfort her. The girls then entered the bedroom where Stephen lay, although they were not allowed to see him. They could hear their mother crying, and no one saw her tears. Meanwhile, in the next room, Stephen was fighting for his life. His injuries were serious. The paramedics began bandaging on the way to the ambulance, trying to hold the huge wound. One officer noticed a shell casing worker on the bedroom floor, leading to the declaration of the room as a crime scene. Investigators and forensic experts were called immediately, and all outsiders were removed from the bedroom to begin the investigation. Celeste was suspected of attacking Stephen. She denied any involvement in the incident, claiming that she was sleeping in another part of the house when he was shot in the stomach. Law enforcement confirmed her alibi with the help of her daughters. New details soon came to light while receiving treatment for depression in a psychiatric hospital. Celeste met another patient named Tracy Tarleton. Very few people in Stephen's inner circle knew about Tracy. Christina mentioned that her mother had referred to Tracy casually. After their relationship ended, various rumors circulated. Some speculated that there were romantic feelings between the two women, while others believed that only Tracy had any affection for Celeste. Investigators theorize that Celeste paid Tracy to kill her husband, to bring the day when Celeste would receive her inheritance. Eventually, Tracy was arrested by the police. During her interrogation, she quickly confessed that on October 2, 1999, she entered the Stevens mansion, went to the bedroom, and shot Stephen in the stomach before fleeing the scene. However, she denied intending to kill him. When police searched her home, they found a weapon, which ballistics later confirmed was the weapon used in the attack. Surprisingly, Stephen survived the attack. Despite his serious injuries, Doctors managed to save his life, and he returned home to continue recovering under the care of Celeste 2 years later. He died from a blood clot that had become detached. Doctors believe this is due to injuries from the previous attack following Stephen's death. Tracy's charges were upgraded to murder, making the situation much more serious. During the investigation, Celeste continued to live her preferred lifestyle, freely spending her late husband's money. She even remarried just 6 months after his death. Her actions raised increasing doubts and suspicions, but she maintained her denial of any involvement in the crime. Initially, Tracy's did not speak about Celeste's involvement in the events surrounding the death of Stephen. However, upon learning about the wedding, Tracy felt betrayed and started to assert that Celeste played a role in the Stephen's death. Tracy accused Celeste, and she agreed to a plea bargain with the prosecution. She also agreed to testify against Celeste in exchange for a reduced prison sentence in 2002. The trial commenced during the proceedings. Tracy testified against Celeste as part of a deal. Strong evidence was presented, including a recording where Celeste admitted to offering money for the murder of Stephen. Additionally, Celeste's daughters also testified against her, claiming that their mother sought a hitman to kill Stephen and then tried to persuade Tracy to prevent Tracy from testifying in the case. The court found Celeste guilty of first-degree murder, sentencing her to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 40 years. Tracy was also convicted and received a 10-year prison sentence, followed by 12 years of probation. Tracy was released from prison in 2011 and later expressed regret for her actions, stating that she regretted the atrocities she committed every day. During an interview in 2004, Celeste maintained her innocence. She is still incarcerated and will be eligible for parole in 2042. When she turns 79, the Stephen Beard case is not just a crime story, but also a reflection on the complex relationships, greed, and betrayal in life, from a wealthy millionaire to the victim of a calculated murder plot. This case shows how blind love, hate, and power can lead to tragedy. Despite ending with harsh sentences, the trauma endured by Stephen's family and the characters involved remains a lasting reminder that sometimes dark secrets can never be hidden forever, and that every decision can change our lives forever. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Gabrielle Ylei. Friendship during youth is very important. However, finding a true friend for life can be challenging. Sometimes, people may appear friendly but have hidden selfish motives or even darker intentions. It's not always easy to recognize these signs, and failing to do so can lead to serious consequences. Gabrielle lives in a cozy little town in Nevada, USA. The local economy relies heavily on the mining industry, which provides jobs and supports families. Gabrielle's family moved here from Colorado Springs. Her father, Jim, had planned to find work in the gold mines. The family was excited about their new life, believing that the town was perfect for them and everything seemed to be going well. Gabrielle was immediately drawn to this vibrant atmosphere. She loved the beautiful natural surroundings, horseback riding and ATV riding, while some consider these activities more suited to boys. This added to Gabrielle's appeal as an active and adventurous young woman. Gabrielle has a close bond with her brother James, who is only a year older than her. They spend a lot of time playing game. Their family, united and loving, always supports each other through difficult times. Even when their parents decided to divorce, they handled the situation calmly to protect their children from emotional distress. After the divorce, both parents maintained a friendly relationship and resolved issues related to property division and child custody without conflict. After the divorce, her mother, Alicia, moved away but chose to live nearby so they could co-parent. Both parents took turns caring for Gabrielle and James and maintained open communication, which helped ease the emotional impact of the divorce on the children. This approach allowed Gabrielle to grow into a strong and intelligent young woman. She became very independent and faced challenges without fear. From a young age, Gabrielle helped her parents with housework. By the age of 16, Gabrielle was skilled at horseback riding, herding cattle, and helping on the farm, and was admired by her family and neighbors for her diligence and professionalism. She was cheerful and easy to get along with. After finishing school, Gabrielle plans to attend college to study psychiatry and help people struggling with mental disorders. Gabrielle has always been empathetic to the pain of others, which is what led her to pursue this career path. However, in 2020, Gabrielle faced bullying at school. Her best friend noted that many of her classmates suddenly turned against her that year for no apparent reason. This friend suspected that envy and jealousy were the main causes, as many girls were jealous of Gabrielle's beauty and intelligence and targeted her for bullying. Eventually, Gabrielle had to switch schools, but she remained optimistic. She had a small group of close friends who truly loved and supported her. Gabrielle started to spend more time on horse racing, where she met others who shared her interests. One of them was Bryce Dickey, who was a couple of years older than her. They quickly became friends, and Gabrielle often referred to him as an older brother. However, it seemed that Bryce wanted something more than friendship. He spent a lot of time with her, and she got along well with his family. Bryce was known to be a kind and polite young man who, like Gabrielle, was always willing to help those in need. Gabrielle and Bryce became close friends because of their similar personalities. They made plans to meet up, as they often did. That day, Gabrielle was at her father's house, where he was practicing with his rock band. She was eager to spend time with her father. She was chatting happily with the band members and even invited Bryce to watch. Unfortunately, Bryce missed practice. Bryce then plans to pick Gabrielle up by car to his house to watch a movie and promises to drop her off later. When her father Jim got home around 7:30 p.m., he discovered that Gabrielle was not home. He searched the house, calling her name, but received no response. Worried, Jim tried calling her, but her phone was turned off. This was unusual, as Gabrielle was usually responsible. She was never late, and it seemed unlikely that she would forget to come home on time. The worried father called Gabrielle's brother James, but he also had no idea where she was. Jim then called Bryce to ask about his daughter. Bryce told Jim that after driving around the city for a few hours, Bryce dropped Gabrielle off near the school, where she met a guy he didn't recognize. Bryce then left to avoid interrupting their conversation. Jim asked Bryce again why they didn't go to the movie as planned. Bryce explained that he and Gabrielle had simply changed plans and decided to drive along country roads. Naturally, Jim was anxious to know who Gabrielle had met, but Bryce couldn't provide any details. He described the man as a tall, blond young man with the appearance of a cowboy. Jim was surprised by Bryce's words. He didn't understand who this stranger was or why Bryce would leave Gabrielle with a stranger instead of taking her home as planned. Bryce had always made sure to take care of Gabrielle, so this behavior seemed unusual. Bryce was very worried about what had happened. He felt guilty for not taking Gabrielle home, explaining that she had asked him to leave. Bryce now realized that the situation could be serious and that something might have happened to her. He remembered that the stranger was driving an old RD F-150 pickup truck. This only added to the family's worries, as none of her friends owned such a vehicle. Gabrielle's family tried calling her hundreds of times, but each call went straight to voicemail. Concerned, her parents decided to contact the police. However, as usual, the police assumed that Gabrielle had probably just run away or gone out with friends and would return soon. However, her parents knew that this was not normal for Gabrielle. She had very few friends and none of them knew where she was. Gabrielle had no family problems, addictions, or mental health concerns, and there had been no recent conflicts. To her family, her sudden disappearance was a clear indication that something serious had happened. The sheriff realized the seriousness of the situation. He gathered all the information available from Gabrielle's friends and acquaintances. The police then contacted Bryce to request a meeting near the school where Gabrielle had gone missing, to provide details about what happened after he dropped her off. Bryce said that he had spent the day with Gabrielle and that they had been driving around the Spring Creek area in his car. However, during their outing, his father called unexpectedly and asked him to come home immediately to help with some errands. Understanding the situation, Gabrielle agreed to reschedule their trip for the next day, but she asked to be dropped off near the school. She also mentioned that she wanted to meet her new friend, Jetty. Bryce reported that after Gabrielle exited his car, she walked directly towards a green pickup truck where a white man in a cowboy hat was sitting. He observed her but then drove off, unsure if she entered a stranger's vehicle. The Bryce had a poor recollection of the details and did not note the pickup truck's license plate. During the conversation, the police found no reason to suspect Bryce. He seemed innocent, so they decided to release him and continue investigating other clues. The police wanted to draw public attention to the case using the media, believing that someone might have seen the man in the cowboy hat and driving the green pickup truck. Initially, the police focused on identifying the license plate number. Additionally, the sheriff contacted the phone service provider to determine the last known location of Gabrielle's cell phone. They discovered that her phone had been active near the school where Bryce had dropped her off. As a result, the police rushed to that location in hopes of finding new evidence, but they found nothing suspicious there. Gabrielle's family and friends continued to search the streets, hoping to find any clues to her whereabouts in the city and surrounding areas. They distributed and posted more than 500 flyers, but local residents remained unresponsive and there were no new leads for the investigation. It felt as if Gabrielle had disappeared without a trace. Meanwhile, Gabrielle's mother Alicia created a social media group to share updates and information about the search, but the effort yielded no results. Then, out of the blue, she received a text message from an unknown number. The sender claimed to have kidnapped Gabrielle and demanded a $25 ransom, threatening to harm her if Alicia did not pay. After some time, the kidnappers sent another text message, saying that Gabrielle was sick and would die without the medicine. The kidnapper insisted that he would only provide the medicine if he received the money he demanded. Initially, the parents agreed to the kidnappers' demands, but they decided to contact the police first. Alicia called the police to report the situation. They quickly asked her to come to the station so they could trace the phone number. It seemed that the investigation had turned up an important lead. While police were trying to track down the phone number used by the kidnapper, one of the search team leaders contacted the police. He informed them that volunteers were searching about 20 kilometers from the city when they discovered a puddle of what appeared to be dried blood on the side of the road. The search team got out of their vehicles and began searching the area, where they eventually discovered a blue tarp in the bushes. Underneath, they found the body of a girl lying face down, her clothes matching Gabrielle's description. One of the police officers entered the office and announced that the interview with Alicia would have to be postponed because they had to go to the scene where the body was discovered. Alicia began to cry, and upon arriving at the scene she identified Gabrielle. Forensic experts determined that Gabrielle had been raped, as her pants and underwear were pulled down to her ankles. She had been strangled and her throat had been slit. Which was the cause of death? Police found Gabrielle's headphones tangled in a nearby tree branch. They also found a used condom and its packaging near her body. This provided a clue to the investigation. Police wanted to learn more about Jetty, Gabrielle's new acquaintance, but no one could provide specific details about him. Finding this individual became a top priority. Gabrielle's family received significant support from social networks, with Bryce being particularly notable. He maintained close contact with Gabrielle's mother, father, and brother, offering help and expressing his sorrow. He described Gabrielle as a bright person and a close friend he would never forget. Meanwhile, the police began their investigation by obtaining warrants to search the Gabrielle's computer and mobile phone. They also needed to analyze the evidence they had collected, including DNA found on a condom, which was crucial for solving the case. It was suspected that Gabrielle might have been targeted by an internet predator with a history of sexual violence. The police quickly created and reviewed a list of registered sex offenders in the area who might have been connected to the incident. To identify the criminal, all the information needed to be compared. However, this process took a long time, causing the investigation to drag on. Meanwhile, the police quickly checked the information from the kidnapper. They were able to trace the phone number that called the Alicia to demand a ransom. Unfortunately, this number was not registered in Nevada. It was a hidden number bought online, making it impossible to track. The police first wanted to identify Jetty, who was considered the prime suspect in the case. After obtaining information from Gabrielle's phone, the police quickly located him. However, they were disappointed to discover that Jetty was in Alaska at the time of Gabrielle's death. Although they had met shortly before the incident and had planned to meet again, he was not the one who raped and murdered her. He had an alibi. He had not left Alaska during that time. The police decided to investigate all other people with similar initials, driving similar cars, and living in the city, surrounding areas, and near where the body was found. They were only able to identify two young men driving a green pickup truck, but both had alibis, as they were far away at the time of the murder. This stalled the investigation. The police then contacted Gabrielle's family again, hoping to get new information. Alicia said that in the weeks before her death, Gabrielle had been dating a guy who was pursuing a cowboy lifestyle, living on a ranch and competing in rodeos. They quickly broke up because Gabrielle wasn't ready for intimacy. After the breakup, they remained friends, but during some nasty arguments, he made extreme comments about wanting her dead. After verifying his alibi, it seems the investigation has stalled once again. However, the police took one last approach to identifying the suspect. They decided to review all the city's surveillance camera footage, specifically looking for a green pickup truck driven by a cowboy. Fortunately, there were several high-quality cameras along the route Gabrielle took before her death and captured clear images. Police had to analyze multiple videos that had been recorded. Despite their efforts, they were unable to find the green pickup truck that Bryce had mentioned. However, police did find something interesting. The blue Chevy pickup that Bryce himself drove really was on the recording. He did not stop or let anyone out, which suggests that he lied about the green pickup truck. The police then decided to trace the route the blue pickup took. Bryce had previously claimed he had been driving around the area with his girlfriend for several hours, but this was proven false by the video evidence. The police decided to request data from Bryce's cell phone to compare his geographic location with that of the assault victim. They quickly obtained a warrant to access this data, and did not notify him to avoid alerting a new suspect. It was clear that he had been with Gabrielle all day, because their movements matched until her cell phone turned off. Additionally, he was present at the location where Gabrielle's body was discovered before returning home. This indicated that Bryce was present at the crime scene and may have committed or witnessed the crime. To verify the assumption, an examination was conducted. The Bryce was immediately asked to undergo tests and provide DNA samples. He agreed. He was later released, but the police did not reveal their suspicions. Instead, they acted as if everything was normal and collected samples from everyone in the area. Skin particles were found under Gabrielle's fingernails, and these samples matched Bryce's DNA. It was clear that he had sex with Gabrielle, but everything happened involuntarily. Bryce was called in for questioning again. Bryce agreed to be questioned without hesitation, remaining calm and confident. The police asked him if he had ever had a relationship with Gabrielle, especially sexual. He denied these allegations, claiming that he considered her like a younger sister. Bryce's statements raised suspicion because if he was telling the truth, his DNA would not have been present at the crime scene. However, police discovered a condom containing his semen at the scene of the murder. Feeling that the police were onto something, Bryce changed his story, claiming that Gabrielle had flirted with him and that they had consensual oral sex while using a condom. Bryce later stuck to his story about a man in a green pickup truck, repeatedly claiming that he could not provide a clear description of the cowboy or the truck's license plate. However, multiple traces of Bryce's DNA were found under Gabrielle's fingernails, in her private parts, and even on her neck, near the fatal stab wound. Additionally, based on Bryce's movements and the surveillance camera footage, it was confirmed that he did not stop anywhere else. This indicated that he was lying. Under pressure from the police, Bryce eventually confessed that what happened to Gabrielle was an accident. He mentioned that she wanted to have rough sex with a knife, and in a moment of passion, the blade accidentally stabbed her. This explanation seems very unlikely, especially given his history of dishonesty. Bryce Dickey, 18, was arrested on March 19, 2020. Following his arrest, police searched his home and vehicle. At Bryce's home, police discovered several bloody items in his closet, including a knife that was determined to be the murder weapon. In the trunk of his car, they found a bloody sweatshirt with Gabrielle's blood on it, along with multiple fingerprints and DNA samples linking Bryce to the crime. When Gabrielle's family received the news, they were completely stunned. Her family had always considered Bryce a good young man, and he had treated them like family, considering him Gabrielle's best friend. The family had trusted Bryce as if he were their own, not knowing that he would betray them in such a terrible way. While the townspeople saw him as the true cowboy and a good person who would help others in times of need, he was actually hiding his true nature. Gabrielle's family trusted him. He made sure she got home safely and gave her regular rides, which seemed thoughtful. However, his intentions were not noble. He was actually trying to get close to his victim. In May 2022, the prosecution presented several credible testimonies, including testimony from Bryce's ex-girlfriend. She described him as aggressive and cruel, often getting into arguments. She recounted that he had choked her at least 4 times during their conflicts, with the last incident being so severe that she felt she was on the verge of death. She ended her relationship with Bryce, who had been stalking and threatening her for a long time. It was only when her parents threatened to call the police that he stopped. The jury then deliberated for about an hour and unanimously found Bryce Dickey guilty of first-degree murder and rape. The judge sentenced Bryce Dickey to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving 20 years. He received an additional 20 years for using a deadly weapon, another 20 years for kidnapping, and 10 more years for rape. In total, he will serve 70 years before he can seek release. Bryce did not explain his motive for the crime. However, a friend of Gabrielle's revealed that just days before the murder, Bryce confessed his love to her, but she suggested they remain friends. Police believe that Bryce could not handle the rejection and felt resentful. When he learned that Gabrielle was seeing a new boyfriend named Jetty, he became angry and sought revenge. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Jennifer Wartz. After Rebecca and her husband divorced, she and her daughter, Jennifer, moved to the Somerset Tower residential area. She purchased an apartment in a 7-story building in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Jennifer felt that her mother was having a hard time during this period, and she thought that it had something to do with her parents' divorce. However, Rebecca's loneliness didn't last long. She soon met Charles, a worker at the complex, and they began a romantic relationship. Charles was an eccentric and cheerful man who often joked around. Before long, Charles moved in with Rebecca. Initially, she felt this was a positive change after the emotional hardships of her divorce. She appeared to enjoy her new relationship. However, Charles's behavior soon became concerning. His mood swings were drastic. He could go from laughing hysterically to becoming angry. He started to seem unpredictable and strange. Charles worked on weekends, and during this time, Jennifer saw the true nature of he. Charles began harassing her and quickly progressed to sexual violence. At just 7 years old, Jennifer realized that something terrible was happening. Little girl mustered the courage to tell her mother, Rebecca, about it. However, Rebecca didn't believe her daughter. Rebecca dismissed her claims, telling her that she was imagining things, which caused she to resent her mother. Rebecca never took any action against Charles, not even to investigate her daughter's allegations. As a result, the abuse continued regularly. Jennifer felt so miserable that she didn't want to go home after school because her mother was not supportive. This situation persisted for 3 years. On February 26, 1991, police contacted Rebecca to ask for information about her missing neighbor, Didi Rosenthal. Detectives interviewed everyone in the area to gather information about Didi. That same day, they also questioned a local rapist named Charles. He surprised them by claiming he did not know Didi, despite the fact that they had been neighbors for a long time. As an employee of the complex, he should have seen her regularly at work. Didi Rosenthal, 32, is a therapist who specializes in supporting children with autism. Her colleagues, patients, neighbors, and family all spoke highly of her, indicating that no one would wish her harm. Didi had moved from Canada to the United States less than a year before her disappearance. Witnesses reported seeing her for the last time on February 22, and since then, there had been no leads. Investigators spoke not only with neighbors but also with Didi's family. Her brother, Blaine, mentioned that Didi had aspirations of attending the Alvin Institute in Philadelphia, a dream she had since college, which motivated her move to the U.S. The Alvin Institute is a specialized clinic designed to help children with autism. Blaine expressed disapproval of Didi's decision to move to the United States, feeling that it was a harsh place and very different from Canada and their familiar traditions. He admitted to the police that he tried his best to prevent her from leaving for a foreign country, but she was very determined, took everything for granted, and believed she would be able to return home soon. Witnesses reported seeing a woman who resembled Didi, but identified her as Lori. Unfortunately, these leads did not yield any results. Ultimately, his hopes were not realized, and Didi vanished without a trace. At the beginning of the investigation, the police focused on 2 suspects, both of whom worked at the apartment complex where Didi disappeared. The first suspect was Steve Gomez, Didi's boyfriend. The second was Charles Reddish, the man known locally as Crazy Charles. Both men appeared suspicious, but the police lacked concrete evidence against them. Despite this, they remained on the investigators' radar. Charles claimed he spent the entire day on February 22 with his mother and a young girl named Jennifer. Little girl confirmed his alibi, stating he was with her the whole time. The police could not find any evidence to charge Charles. However, some detectives noticed Jennifer's fear when they mentioned him. This caught the attention of investigators, but they could not take any action against Charles without further evidence or testimony. The Wirtz family experienced several years of suffering and humiliation after a mysterious incident, which ultimately led them to move out of the apartment complex. While this may make people suspicious, the act actually stems from anxiety about the possibility of a crime happening around them. Many residents chose to leave for their safety because rumors of Dee Dee's disappearance had spread quickly. People were eager to distance themselves from the possibility of living near a potential criminal. Meanwhile, detectives continued their investigation. As they gathered more information, they encountered increasingly conflicting clues. Forensic experts examined the home of Dee Dee, but found it completely empty. The apartment was clean and tidy, with no signs of forced entry or a struggle. However, the front door was unlocked, which was unusual for a missing person case. Despite their efforts, forensic experts found no evidence of blood. It appeared as if Dee Dee had calmly left her apartment, as her belongings were untouched and her car was still parked outside. The only clue investigators discovered was an $80 check hidden in a diary, but there was no cash in her purse or wallet. All clues pointed to Dee Dee having left her home voluntarily. Investigators learned that she had financial difficulties, often spending more than she earned and have a lot of debt, but these problems do not appear to be serious enough to involve kidnapping or murder. However, it raised the question, did Dee Dee leave to escape her creditors? After interviewing all of Dee Dee's neighbors, detectives uncovered a concerning claim from one elderly woman. She reported that on February 22nd, around 4 a.m., she was awakened by a loud thud from the ceiling, which she later realized was caused by Dee Dee, her upstairs neighbor. The sound startled her, but after a brief silence, she assumed it was just something that had fallen and returned to sleep. Meanwhile, all the other residents provided no useful information, leaving the investigation at a standstill. Dee Dee's sudden disappearance captured public attention, and the media began extensively covering the story. However, due to a lack of evidence, the case remained unresolved for years. The Wartz family later moved into a new home north of Cherry Hill. Rebecca and Jennifer felt so sad for Dee Dee, but they never knew what happened to her. Over time, they, like others, gradually forgot about Dee Dee, including the police, who suggested she might have returned to Canada. Dee Dee's brother Blaine is not satisfied with this explanation and continues to search for her. Unlike everyone else, he is the only one who doesn't give up. He's frustrated by law enforcement's inability to provide answers or locate Dee Dee. He spent years visiting local bars, restaurants, and neighbors' apartments around Hill 67, interviewing anyone who might have information. Eventually, Blaine admits that his relentless search has become a kind of obsession, causing him to lose almost everything, including his family. One day, upon returning home from another search, his wife told him she wanted to break up, marking the end of their relationship. Life was challenging for the Wartz family after they moved to a new home. They understood why Charles was called crazy. He often acted inappropriately and hurled insults at Rebecca and Jennifer. His aggression was escalating, and although Jennifer never witnessed he physically harmed her mother, Rebecca, but little girls suspected that her mother was also suffering from his abusive behavior. However, they stayed together and Rebecca endured the troubles of the relationship. For years, Jennifer suffered from the pain of his abuse, and little girl knew her mother was enduring the same. Despite everything, Rebecca was not ready to leave him. Jennifer spent a lot of time trying to convince her mother, Rebecca, to leave Charles. Eventually, little girl succeeded in persuading her mother that their toxic relationship needed to end. They planned an escape and decided to move in with Jennifer's grandmother, a place Charles had never visited, which would keep them hidden. Jennifer was thrilled with this plan. Little girl looked forward to being free from Charles, the man who had tormented her for so long. It seemed like they were on the verge of freedom. However, Rebecca made a critical mistake by inadvertently revealing their plans to Charles. It was Jennifer's last day at school. Following Rebecca's request, little girl had secretly packed her belongings in advance and hidden them. According to their plan, Rebecca was supposed to pick her up after school around 6 p.m., right after she finished playing field hockey with her friends. When she went to the parking lot, she was surprised to see not her mother driving, but Charles, and her mother sitting in the passenger seat. Angered, she yelled at her mother, feeling frustrated that her mother never kept her promises. In response, Rebecca simply told she to get in the car and calm down. Inside the car, an eerie silence fell. Jennifer felt a sense of foreboding throughout the journey. Charles watched her intently through the rearview mirror, and she dreaded what awaited her at home. Jennifer worries that he has bad intentions to keep her and her mother by his side. When they got home, Charles seemed normal. He said he wanted to have a farewell party before they left. But Jennifer didn't buy it. Her fears were confirmed when they entered the house and found no dinner prepared. Confused, little girl asked about it, but he stammered a vague explanation, then abruptly stating he needed the car keys to buy groceries and rushed out. Desperate, Jennifer urged Rebecca to seize the moment and escape before Charles returned, sensing something was off. However, Rebecca dismissed her concerns and told her to wait for he to return. He has a surprise for them. Frustrated, Jennifer retreated to her room, lay down on her bed, and eventually fell asleep. In the middle of the night, Jennifer was jolted awake by a loud noise around 2 a.m. Alarmed, she couldn't ignore it any longer. She got up and began to descend the stairs, the noise growing louder. When she reached the doorway, she realized something terrible was happening. The sounds were like violent blows, and little girl felt helpless, not knowing how long this horrifying scene would continue. Rebecca was lying on the floor, while her attacker, Charles, leaned over her, striking her repeatedly. Suddenly, he turned around and saw Jennifer. He grabbed the little girl by her hair and dragged her into the living room, where the violence was happening. As he pulled she past Rebecca, she saw something horrifying. Her mother's face was so badly injured that she could hardly recognize her. Rebecca, 43 years old, had a shattered jaw and a broken arm, and she showed no signs of life. To Jennifer, it looked like her mother was dead. Desperate, Jennifer pleaded with Charles not to harm them and to let them go. But he threw her into a chair in the living room, positioning her directly in front of Rebecca. Then, he picked up a small axe from the floor and slowly approached Rebecca. Panicking, little girl screamed for him to stop. She could hear her mother's labored breathing and realized her mother was still alive. But soon, there were more blows, and he attacking her mother. He was literally chopping into Rebecca with the axe. The smell of blood filled the air. Then, he pulled the sheet off Jennifer and dragged her upstairs to the bedroom. There, he tortured and raped her for 2 to 3 hours. Little girl was powerless to resist and simply prayed for it all to end. After Charles finished his torment, he sat next to Jennifer on the bed. She was badly injured and covered in blood, but she was still alive. Then, he asked her to kill him. Jennifer replied that she couldn't do that. He suddenly declared that he would kill her and then end his life, as he didn't want to end up in prison. Terrified, Jennifer didn't want to take a life, even one as evil as Charles's. Although she felt helpless, she remembered methods she had seen in crime shows about negotiating with hostage takers, and she decided to apply them. Little girl focused on listening calmly to he. She aimed to show empathy, hoping to soothe him, and gradually convinced him not only to spare her life but also to reconsider taking his own. Jennifer advised Charles that it would be a good idea if he told the police the truth, saying that he had lost control and was acting erratically. Besides, he could also negotiate with the prosecutor to get a reduced sentence. However, he, feeling uncertain, began pacing back and forth in the bedroom, holding a bloody axe. For the first time, he understood the severity of what he had done. Little girl managed to persuade he to surrender to the police, and then she called 911 for help. She was clearly in shock and find it difficult to express one's thoughts. Charles even assisted Jennifer's in getting up, dressing, and walking to the porch. The dispatcher informed them that the police were on their way and they just had to wait. It's difficult to imagine what Jennifer was feeling during this time. She knew that he was unpredictable and could harm them at any moment. Despite this, little girl waited calmly for the police to arrive. Then, they quickly separated she from Charles. One of the detectives investigating Charles recalled his unusual reaction when asked about Rebecca's location. He vaguely stated she was inside the house and, when asked if she needed an ambulance, he claimed she can no longer be helped. Despite his assertion, it was clear that help was urgently required. A detective from the Cherry Hill Police Department arrived at the scene. This was the same officer who had investigated Dee Dee's disappearance 4 years ago. He remembered a repairman named Charles, who had caught his attention back then, and now he decided to question Charles's again. The police, along with Charles, entered the house equipped with a tape recorder to document the incident. They aimed to piece together the horrifying incidents that had taken place there. During the questioning, both the accounts of Charles and Jennifer aligned, until Jennifer disclosed the rape and torture that took place in her bedroom. Charles completely denied these allegations, he seemingly unable to accept the reality of what he had done to she. When the police mentioned the rape, he laughed, dismissing the idea of being intimate with Jennifer, a 14-year-old girl, as ridiculous. However, as the interrogation continued, he confessed to everything. Detectives from the Cherry Hill station suspect Charles has vital information about Dee Dee's case. Knowing that it was easy to get information out of Charles, they questioned him again about the disappearance of Dee Dee, who had been gone for 4 years. Their intuition was right, and he began confessing. He revealed that early one morning, he entered Dee Dee's apartment through the roof, descending onto her balcony. His intention was to rob and assault her. However, she caught him in the act. Then, in the struggle, he attacked her, raped her, and subjected her to mistreatment. He feared that she could identify him and report him to the police. To eliminate this risk, he decided to kill her. Charles explained that they fought on the bed, and during the struggle, Dee Dee fell to the floor. The loud noise of her fall was heard by a neighbor below. After that, he strangled her with a pillow and fled the scene. He had stolen $80 from her apartment, which the police found the next day. Subsequently, he returned to the scene, wrapped Dee Dee's body in a sheet, and transported it to the parking lot in a grocery cart. He also gathered her belongings and disposed of them in a nearby dumpster. After confessing to both murders, Charles led police to where he hid Dee Dee's body. But unfortunately, he couldn't recall the exact location. However, the police still believed him because he provided specific details about the crime that only the perpetrator could have known. He claimed to have taken Dee Dee to the Delaware River area, and he disposed of the body in a spot known for frequent waste dumping. During the 4 years Dee Dee's body lay there, thousands of tons of garbage accumulated, making the search extremely difficult. Despite extensive efforts, but the remains of Dee Dee were never found, and the search was eventually discontinued. Charles faced 2 trials for the murders. After the search concluded, both cases were assigned to a prosecutor from Hill. Following the initial meeting with the lawyer, Charles, apparently on the advice of his defense attorney, withdrew his earlier confessions to the murders. In any case, a confession alone is not enough to result in a conviction in the state of New Jersey. To achieve a conviction, any oral confession must be accompanied by specific and credible evidence. This means that Dee Dee's murder is unlikely to go unsolved, as the police have little evidence left other than an $80 check. 2 trials took place, one after the other, with Charles as the defendant in both cases. The first trial involved the murder of Rebecca Wartz and the torture of her daughter, Jennifer. During the trial, Jennifer demonstrated courage and composure as a witness, providing clear and concise answers. The forensic expert testified about Rebecca's severe injuries, which included at least 25 axe blows. Due to the overwhelming evidence against Charles, the jury delivered a guilty verdict after only 40 minutes of deliberation. As a result, Charles received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The second trial involved the death of Didi Rosenthal and presented a more complex situation. Although the prosecutor aimed to achieve a harsher punishment, the difficulty lay in the lack of evidence at the crime scene, which Charles had meticulously cleaned up. Furthermore, Charles retracted his earlier confession and presented an alibi, claiming that Didi had simply moved away to start a new life. This new testimony gave Charles a chance to avoid conviction. However, the prosecutor tried to prove that Didi was not the type of person who would give up everything and go adventuring. She has completely devoted her love to taking care of autistic children and she cannot leave them. Her brother, Blaine, corroborated this, stating that she would have informed him if she had planned to leave. Furthermore, all of her belongings, including her documents, keys, car, and pet cat, were still in her apartment. In Charles's recorded confession, he claimed that Rebecca was the only person who knew about his involvement in Didi's murder. It is unclear why Rebecca chose to keep this a secret. Perhaps she was afraid of Charles or did not believe the truth. He stated in his confession, as well as in a previous conversation with his daughter, that he was under the influence of prohibited substances during both crimes. Charles Reddish was initially charged with Didi Rosenthal's murder in November 1995. 3 years later, in December 1998, he was convicted of the crimes he committed against Rebecca and Jennifer. By March 2001, he agreed to confess to Didi's manslaughter as part of a plea bargain with the prosecution. The terms of the agreement required he to reveal the location of Didi's body. However, at the last minute, he changed his mind and refused to comply. The prosecutor believed that he realized the extent of his crimes and was concerned about additional charges, which led to him changing his mind. Consequently, the plea bargain was withdrawn, and he went to trial again in October 2001. Charles again made false claims that Didi was still alive and mentioned a missing woman named Laura. However, the jury saw through the lie, and he was sentenced to death in 2002. But in 2004, the New Jersey Supreme Court overturned the death sentence. 1 year later, it was replaced with a prison term of 30 to 60 years, which was added to his life sentence for Rebecca and Jennifer. Unfortunately, the body of Didi was never recovered. After the trial, Jennifer was able to start a new life. She moved in with her cousin Shannon. She was finally able to live a peaceful life, free from the years of torture and mistreatment. She attended a Catholic school, joined a support group for young girls who had survived traumatic experiences. Her relatives provided significant support. As she grew older, Jennifer was able to come to terms with the traumatic experiences she had endured. She worked hard, built a successful career, started a family, and became a mother to 2 daughters. Blaine, Didi's brother, held on to hope, despite his failure to find his missing younger sister. Blaine felt relieved to know that justice had been served, and especially that Charles was no longer causing harm to anyone because he was in custody. In tribute to Didi, Blaine established a Canadian foundation in her name, focusing on supporting women who have endured physical and emotional abuse. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Nurauder family. Michelle and Lloyd Nurauder, 2 high school students, have a very close relationship. He was a year younger than she, but this didn't stop him from falling in love with her. They dated for 2 years and then got married. By the mid-90s, Lloyd graduated with an engineering degree and began teaching science at a university. He then worked as an engineer at a factory. Michelle pursued higher education and became an English teacher at a college. During this time, their first daughter was born, followed by 2 more daughters later on. The 90s were a period of many important changes for them. They moved to a large house in a town called Corning, near New York. They appeared happy. Lloyd works very hard but still makes time for his family, especially his 3 daughters. Michelle was positive and energetic, managing the household and caring for the children. As a teacher, she also educated their children at home. Together, they formed an ideal family, admired by many of their acquaintances. Over time, Lloyd's behavior changed significantly. He used to be a caring father and husband, but then he began to act in a patriarchal manner, manipulating his family to control them. He demanded complete obedience to the rules he set. If there is a conflict, he is willing to use force to force his wife and children to agree with his point of view. This caused the family's relationships to deteriorate. The only daughter with whom Lloyd maintains a good relationship is his second daughter, Carrie. She stood out among her siblings because of her loyalty to he. He spent time with her, took her to the ballet and other events, and even did her hair and makeup. However, he did not show such affection to the rest of the family. As Carrie grew up, she became a very thoughtful person, actively involved in many charitable organizations, and enjoyed helping the homeless. Despite some disagreements. But the Nurauder family stayed together until 2008. During this time, America faced a severe financial crisis, causing job and money problems for millions. Lloyd lost his job and had to look for a new one, but many others were in the same situation. Michelle also looked for jobs but couldn't find any. She had been managing household duties and caring for their daughters. Lloyd eventually found a decent job in New Jersey. Michelle was relieved that he found employment. He moved to New Jersey alone, while Michelle took a part-time job in their hometown, Corning, juggling it with childcare and housework. It was challenging for her, as she was supporting the family on her own. A few months later, things took a strange turn, when Lloyd suddenly demanded a divorce from Michelle. This decision was unexpected because there had been no serious signs of trouble in their marriage. Even their friends hadn't noticed any quarrels between them. Lloyd's decision was a complete shock to Michelle and children, leaving her feeling lost. She had been an excellent mother and wife, but her husband put her in a difficult position. He claimed that during their time apart, he has no more feelings and no longer wanted to be with her. Worse still, before proposing the divorce, he had that she cut off all ties with her family and friends. This further upset Michelle, as she felt isolated and lacking support. Despite experiencing a nervous breakdown, she managed to pull herself together. She found a job as an English teacher at a college and became a single mother. Several years after the divorce, Michelle and her children moved to another house in the same city. Her daughters had grown up, which made her life easier. The girls can help with housework and take care of themselves. This allowed Michelle to focus more on her work. She has built a successful career and made a lot of money. Even so, Lloyd, a manipulative person, still makes things difficult when fights over child support and arguing about alimony. The divorce process lasted about 5 years, during which Lloyd repeatedly attempted to discredit Michelle to gain custody. Despite this, Michelle fought back, she defending herself in court and made a rebuttal against Lloyd. Lloyd was a skilled manipulator, and after 2010, the middle daughter, Carrie, moved in with him. Little girl believed it was her own decision because she loved and missed her father. The other children did not agree with her choice and urged her to stay with their mother, Michelle. In court, the judge supported the decision of the other children to remain with Michelle. On August 28, 2017, a family friend arrived at Michelle's house to pick up her youngest daughter for swimming practice. As he got out of the car and approached the house, he noticed Michelle in an unusual position by the stairs, visible through the living room window. He knocked on the door, but no one answered, and Michelle didn't move. The dog was barking continuously, which made him feel uneasy. He found the door was unlocked. So he went inside to check. As he got closer, he realized that Michelle was not standing but was hanging from the railing. He checked her pulse, but her hand was cold and numb. He immediately called 911, reports that Michelle appears to have ended his life. When emergency services arrived, they confirmed that 46-year-old Michelle had been dead for some time and beyond repair. The police searched the house but found no one else present, even though Michelle lived there with her 14-year-old daughter. Carrie lived with Lloyd, and the eldest daughter was away at college. At first, it seemed like Michelle had committed to end his life. However, as the police investigated, they found more inconsistencies in the case. There were marks on Michelle's face, suggesting the incident may have been staged. It was also strange that the youngest daughter was nowhere to be seen, even though she was supposed to be home. This led the police to consider both murder and the possible kidnapping of the child. Detectives contacted Carrie and Lloyd. They first reached Carrie, and the little girl said that her youngest sister was there. This interested the police, as the younger daughter never missed training and did not want to go to her father's house, Lloyd. Michelle hadn't allowed her to miss school the day before, so why did she go there? The police then confirmed this with Carrie. Carrie explained she had stayed overnight at Michelle's. Carrie and her sister left Michelle's home long before a family friend discovered Michelle. According to little girl, Michelle had been unstable and hysterical during the day, so Carrie didn't want to leave her younger sister with her mother and took her with her. The story seemed implausible because Michelle's body was cold when discovered, indicating she had died long before. This contradicted Carrie's statement that they left shortly before a family friend found Michelle's. Contacting Michelle's acquaintances and friends also made Carrie's story more suspicious, as they provided a different perspective to the police. A friend mentioned that 2 days before her death, Michelle attended a court hearing about custody issues for her youngest daughter. Lloyd was actively fighting for custody, but he was unexpectedly absent from the last meeting and did not answer calls, which was very unlike him. Michelle was very happy because she would win custody of her youngest daughter. She even celebrated with her lawyer, confident she would be granted full custody due to Lloyd's absence. Therefore, she had no reason to be anxious or depressed, as the custody issue had been resolved in her favor. Michelle's mother, Jeannie, upon learning about the tragedy, immediately informed the police that she suspected Lloyd of being responsible for her death. She could not believe that Michelle would choose to end her own life and leave her children behind. Consequently, Lloyd became the prime suspect, because for years, he tried to take away Michelle's custody, and their divorce had been contentious. It was initially difficult to reach Lloyd. According to Carrie, he was with her at the time of the murder, help her settle into her new home before going to university. Lloyd spent the night at a hotel in Rochester, which is about 160 kilometers from Cortland, and then flew to California for a job interview, placing him 4,000 kilometers away. When investigators contacted Lloyd and informed him of Michelle's death, he showed no emotion. After the trial, Lloyd went to the police station and confirmed Carrie's claim that during the time of Michelle's death, he was in another city helping Carrie move. According to Lloyd, Carrie came to see him at the hotel to see how he was getting along. He then took little girl to the parking lot, and she left, and he returned to his room. He provided the hotel reservation as evidence. Although he agreed to take a polygraph test, he never did. Detectives couldn't file charges due to insufficient evidence, but they were suspicious The police began reviewing CCTV footage and phone records to track the movements of Lloyd and Carrie in the days leading up to Michelle's death. They found inconsistencies between the footage and the location of Lloyd's phone, suggesting he was deliberately leaving his phone behind to hide his movements. It became clear he was not truthful. Carrie was indeed with he at a Rochester hotel, but in the evening, they went to the parking lot, and he did not return to the room as he claimed. They went somewhere on the night of the murder and only returned at 7 a.m. the next day. Investigators found that Lloyd was in financial trouble. He has to bear large debts. He owed $100,000 on one credit card and was in desperate need of money. However, after the death of Michelle, he received over $200,000 from her life insurance, which was beneficial for him. This made investigators more suspicious of him, and they to scrutinize him more closely. When checking the location data from Carrie and Lloyd's cell phones, investigators found out that it seemed like Carrie was involved too. The decision was made to monitor the conversations between Carrie and Lloyd. Wiretaps of their phone calls revealed they were indeed hiding something. They avoided many topics during their discussions, and Lloyd often abruptly ended Carrie's questions, as if aware they were being monitored. Some conversations were deferred to face-to-face meetings. Lloyd repeatedly stressed the importance of keeping quiet during their calls, indicating they had secrets to conceal. The detectives were certain they were on the right track and expected Carrie and Lloyd to confess, but it didn't happen. So, the police decided to accelerate the investigation by speaking to Carrie directly. They invited her for questioning. However, she did not go to the police station, making various excuses. Through wiretapping, the police discovered that Lloyd was pressuring her to delay and forbade her from going to the station to avoid exposure. Meanwhile, a forensic expert performed an autopsy on Michelle and confirmed clear signs of murder. He found bruises around her eyes and marks on her chin. It appeared she was attacked from behind and strangled. The attacker held her by the throat, making it difficult for her to resist. It was evident that she hadn't committed to end his life, and the situation was clearly a setup. This forced them to contact Carrie again. However, she continued not to go to the police station. The detectives didn't want to hear her excuses anymore, so they met her right after school. She was caught off guard and confused at the police station. Initially, she denied everything. She admitted to being with Lloyd at Michelle's house that morning, but claimed she didn't know what happened there. Her parents started arguing, then they went upstairs and continued arguing. Under pressure from the detectives, Carrie revealed an even more terrifying than Lloyd's. Carrie confessed that Lloyd really killed Michelle, and she was there to ensure her sister didn't witness the crime. She was actually an accomplice to the murder. A week before the incident, she and Lloyd planned to make it look like Michelle had ended her life. The police listened to the candid confession of she. She admitted to hating her mother but couldn't explain why. She idolized her father, Lloyd. This is typical behavior of a manipulated person. Under Lloyd's influence, Carrie's hatred for Michelle grew, he manipulating her until the end. This manipulation led her to become an accomplice, agreeing to help him, covering for him, and help prove his alibi. The police arrested Carrie. Then, they went to Lloyd's house, but he wasn't there. Investigators tracked him down in Princeton using his phone. When officers arrived at the parking lot where he was located, Lloyd saw them and climbed onto a railing, threatening to jump from the 5th floor. After 2 hours of negotiations, the police were able to reach him, and he was arrested. He was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and tampering with evidence. He was shocked by the arrest and denied all charges. He claimed he was at a hotel during the crime. Phone records supported his alibi, and he had a room reservation at the time. However, CCTV footage showed him leaving the hotel with Carrie at night and returning during the day. GPS data placed him near Michelle's house at the time of the murder, and Michelle's pajamas had his DNA. This evidence dismantled his alibi. 19-year-old Carrie was charged with second-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and concealment of evidence. She faced a potential life sentence with the possibility of parole after 25 years. To avoid the maximum penalty, she admitted her guilt and agreed to cooperate with the prosecution. She was required to testify against her own father at the trial. During the trial, the prosecutor highlighted a troubling aspect of the case: Carrie was directly involved in the crime. She was present in Michelle's house and assisted Lloyd. Despite having multiple chances to stop the crime, she chose not to intervene and instead helped her father murder her mother. According to the evidence, Carrie and Lloyd arrived at Michelle's house early in the morning. She trusted them and opened the front door, unaware of the impending betrayal by they. Lloyd attacked Michelle and strangled her with a rope. While this happened, Carrie ensured that her younger sister remained asleep and did not witness the crime. After the murder, they left through the back door, preventing the younger sister from realizing what had occurred inside the house. The evidence collected by the detectives included nearly 26 files. Most pointed out that Lloyd had been turning Carrie against her mother, Michelle, for years. He consistently insulted Michelle and portrayed her negatively. Once Carrie moved in with him, he began to restrict her communication. His goal was to kill Michelle and other children. Consequently, she unintentionally developed hatred toward Michelle. The prosecution claimed that the motive for the murder was to claim life insurance money and avoid sharing custody of his youngest daughter. Lloyd believed that making Michelle's death look like she had ended her own life would allow them to live comfortably with the money. In court, Carrie testified that Lloyd gave her a harsh ultimatum: either they kill her mother, or he might end his own life. He complained about his difficult financial situation because he had to pay $6,000 in alimony every month, stating he couldn't continue living this way. Faced with this, Carrie made a dire choice and agreed to help in the crime against Michelle. The prosecutor acknowledged that Lloyd manipulated Carrie and advocated for lenient punishment for her. Ultimately, he admitted his guilt in the murder. As a result, Lloyd was found guilty of first-degree murder and other charges. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and is currently held at Clinton Correctional Facility in New York. During the trial, Carrie's maternal grandmother, Jeannie, requested a lighter sentence for Carrie and a harsher sentence for Lloyd, who had tormented Michelle throughout their 25-year marriage and ultimately killed her. Jeannie expressed that she did not believe Michelle would have wanted a severe prison sentence for Carrie, but rather for little girl to lead a happy life. Carrie was found guilty of concealing evidence. The judge considered Jeannie's plea and the prosecutor's perspective, resulting in the lightest possible sentence of 1 to 3 years in prison. Carrie was released early on January 16, 2020.